Good evening. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you to the school board meeting of this Tuesday, June 7th, 2022. On digital display before the meeting, you have been enjoying the award winners from this year's South County Spring Art Show. The winning images shared were created by high school students and one middle school student. The South County Spring Art Show was on display at the Venice Art Center from May 3rd through the 12th and featured art from hundreds of our talented art students from kindergarten through 12th grade. It is a wonderful showcase of our high-quality art programs. Next meeting, we hope to share at our North County Art Show winners. The public is encouraged and welcome to address the school board at the hearing of citizen. Our board assistant, Kathy Tompkins, collects the cards for our hearing of citizens. By now, since the meeting has started, all cards have been collected. We will call you forward at the appropriate time. And now, the superintendent's report.
We're gonna do the pledge.
Oh, sorry. Flag salute, please.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Dr. Asplin.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much. A few items here that I wanted to talk about. First of all, a couple of accolades just real quickly. Congratulations to our Pine View 6th grade science team. They took second place in the National Science League competition. That's very, very good. And we also had a 5th grade student at Taylor Ranch Elementary. His name is Martin Serrano. He recently won a 2-year college prepaid 529 plan to go to college, and he's in 5th grade. So I thought that was very good too, from Taylor Ranch. And then one last reminder too, registration is now open for next school year. And anyone listening, if you haven't registered your student already, please do so. This is very, very important, especially for staffing, because we constantly, all summer long, look at the number of students who are registering and coming into our schools so that we can make sure that we have the appropriate number of teachers. And the last thing we want to do is wait till August. So we've been hiring teachers all along. We've been hiring some really great teachers, and the sooner the better, so we can continue to hire the very best. So please continue to register your students as early as possible going into the summer. All right, as you know, last week there was a horrible tragedy in Texas, as you know. Uvalde in Texas, elementary school, those tiny students and those teachers who were killed, and our heart just goes out to them. That tragedy is something that you never, ever, ever want to see at a school, and it just seems like it happens quite often. And we always reflect on that as a school system. And I just wanted to take a few minutes and let you know some of the things that we are doing here, have done here in Sarasota County to keep our students and our employees safe. There have been questions about that. I've received emails about that, and we just want to make sure everybody understands what we have here. And we'll always continue to try to make our school system even safer as we move forward. But all of our schools do have single point of entry. All of them do, and in that single point of entry area, when you first come in, that glass is bulletproof glass, and so anyone coming in must go through that way. And then the person sitting at the desk obviously has protocol to allow people in properly, and so on and so forth. We have an SRO, a school resource officer, at every single school. Our larger schools, like our high schools, we have multiple police officers, and as you know, we have our police officers here in the evenings. Some of them work during the day at our schools as well. But also, I wanted to mention when you're looking at our law enforcement officers that we have here, we have 60 of them here in our school district. There's over 1,452 years of experience. A lot of these officers are retired, coming from other areas in the country. Some are not retired. We have 5 that have associate's degree, 24 have bachelor's degree, 7 have a master's degree. We have 2 that were involved with the FBI National Academy, 3 who have been chiefs of police, and many that have retired from a command post around the country, including the NYPD, including Chicago PD. These folks are trained in many different areas, a lot of them in SWAT, hostage negotiations. There's a lot of areas, if you were to look to see what they've been involved with, it's very impressive. And they are at our schools protecting our students and our teachers and our employees. And I know for a fact they go above and beyond. If there ever was an active shooter, they'd be in there in 2 seconds taking care of the situation. So I just want to thank them again for all that they do. But in addition to them, we also work very, very well with our local police agencies and sheriff's office. They help us out a great deal. We have a great relationship with them. I know that when we beefed up our security after the Texas situation, those local agencies helped us quite a bit in presence at each of our schools and around our school district, and I really appreciate them as well. We also have threat assessment teams in our district and at our schools, and those threat assessment teams are made up of our police officers, counselors, administrators, teachers, parents, student, school psychologists, social workers, and so on. And the threat assessment teams, here's what they do. When we hear of a threat, the threat assessment team will get together and meet with that child and with the parent and these other folks that I just mentioned to determine if the threat is substantive or transient. And in doing so, that helps us to see what we need to do with that situation. And a lot of times what happens is it comes through on social media. We have a fantastic social media department, I guess you would say, with a person that looks at that constantly. And then we also make sure that when students or parents or teachers are sending us social media, even throughout the night, we're ready to act upon that so that we're ready to go the next morning. And there are many times when our police officers will be out at someone's house at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning doing a check because of some sort of threat that we received on social media. They do a fantastic job with that so that we're ready to go the next day. We don't have to shut the school down and wait for us to figure out what happened. We take care of it even in the middle of the night. And so it's very important, and social media has really helped us with all of that. And then we have our alerts with ConnectEd to keep everyone informed in our county, all of the parents, teachers, employees, students, to keep everyone informed of what is going on when we do receive different threats. And I know that you've received some of those from your principals, depending on what it was. And it could have been anything, even a fire alarm. We will let everyone know that we had to evacuate. So we do a great job with that. We have great reunification plans. We have emergency response plans. We have annual training. We have drills all the time. We have our safe space. We have our doors locked. We're all over this. So I just wanted everyone to be aware of that. And then the fact that we continue to look at that to get better and better. That's something that we'll always do to keep everyone safe. So the last item that I wanted to just bring up for a second, I know I'm getting long-winded today, but I just felt like I should. The third grade scores, I just wanted to mention a couple things about third grade scores because I know that was out in the newspaper, and I just want to make sure I can clarify anything or make sure people understand what that means. So first of all, our third grade scores are proficiency scores. It's not learning gains. It's proficiency, and proficiency means on a scale of 1 to 5, our students that scored 3 and above, that indicates that they are proficient. And so our percentage, as you saw, was 63% this year for our third graders. It's just our third graders in this particular scoring. Last year, we were at 66%. And we're for those of you that are into ranks and so forth, we're ranked 5th. In 18-19, we were ranked 7th. So we're actually a little bit higher, but that doesn't matter. We still need to we still need to do the best we can. There's a lot of work to do, and we need to move forward with that. But I just wanted to bring you up to speed on a couple of things. First of all, and no excuses, because I know nobody wants to hear excuses, but I have to say, COVID was a factor. It really was. I mean, our students, these students who were in third grade, they were in first grade when COVID hit. They were in first grade. And so second semester, when we closed schools down and went remote, they were in first grade. And so they went through the summer with no summer school as well. And then we started the next year in second grade with them, and they were in a concurrent teaching mode. And we had a lot of issues with absences and quarantining. Whether you were sick or not, you had to be quarantined and you're not in school. And that's just not a really good thing. But again, I don't bring that up as an excuse, but I bring it up as a real fact. And when you look at the other districts as well, we have 67 districts, and there were only 11 districts that increased in their third grade proficiency. Only 11, 56 did not. Okay, and we're still, and like I said, if you're into ranking, all of those 11 that increased were still below us. We're at 63%, and 8 of those 11 were in 37 or 52%. And so, everybody struggled with this, and we're going to continue to move forward. I know every district is trying to improve this as much as possible. But what you have to understand here, too, is that proficiency is, like I said, 3 and above. And these students fell so far behind not being in school and some of the things that we had to do with concurrent teaching and so forth. They fell so far behind. They had so far to make up. So there's learning gains there, but not reaching proficiency. And that's what that number is. And so I just want everybody to understand that. Now, I looked at reading recovery, and I looked at our students who are in reading recovery. So I was interested in that. Let's take a look at those students. And so there were 91 students who were in reading recovery in first grade. Remember, reading recovery is only related to our first graders, all right? And the 91 students who went through that in first grade, they were proficient when they left first grade, reading proficiency. They were way below proficiency, couldn't read at all at the beginning of first grade. They were at proficiency at first grade. Last year, 50% of those were proficient. This year, 60% were proficient. So that was a good thing. We were moving forward there. The fact there is that we need to look at our second and third grade, because when they come out of first grade and they're proficient or they're at grade level, what's going on in second and third grade that's having students drop? So we're constantly looking at that. So with that said, I wanted to just move into some of the things that we're doing, and you know this because we've talked about this before. But we need to get better. We always do. No matter what our score is, we need to always look to get better. And just a reminder, we have our new strategic plan. It started in January, halfway through this past year. Our new strategic plan started in January and working forward. The new best standards training happened this year. Our new textbook, ELA, our new ELA reading textbook for all of our Tier 1 students called Benchmark, that was introduced this year. Tier 1, when you look at our Tier 1 students, like I said, K to 5 is Benchmark. We have phonics, reading, writing. And in K to 2, we have the Haggerty, which is phonics. And we work with our students in daily reading blocks in K to 2. We also have our iReady diagnostics. So all of those are for Tier 1 students, which means for everybody, all right? Then in Tier 2, Tier 3, we have leveled literacy intervention for ESC and ELL. We have our reading recovery training, and then we have some Orton, Gillingham, Wilson, and we're going to probably be purchasing some more of that as well. So as we move forward. So those are your Tier 2, Tier 3 levels. And I know I'm getting deep here, but just this is what we do. This is what it is. And so we're continue to work forward with that. Remember, we had 75 ESE teachers in our elementary schools that began to be trained and provided resources as a pilot, if you remember our pilot, which didn't even start till February. So our students really had the opportunity to be with those teachers for 2 months before, or 3 months before they were actually tested. And so building teacher efficacy, building teacher capacity, having our professional learning community training that we're going to be starting in the summer is very important. Collaborative teams, common formative assessments that they'll be working on, analyzing the data, using that data to create small group instruction. understanding and teaching essential standards. Those are all things that are going to happen with our PLC piece. And then we already enhanced and expanded some of our pre-K classes. Last year we had 30 pre-K classes. Now we have 38 across our district. We plan to have 42 next year to help our students in pre-K before they even get to first grade, right? And so, and then parent and volunteer engagement initiative. I know that's very big, and we're working on that. That's very important, the parent and volunteer initiative. And then we're hiring interventionists and Leary coaches right now, and that was through the strategic plan, as we had talked about before. Every school is hiring an interventionist / literacy coach. And so, you know, we are moving ahead. We need to stay the course. We put some things in place. We just need to move forward with that. Our 3rd through 10th grade scores, they will be released at the end of July. Those are the ones that actually give you your district grade. This 3rd grade score doesn't give you that grade. It's just a tiny sliver of the 3rd grade through 10th grade scores that are going to come out at the end of July. That determines our grade here in Sarasota. So I know I said that very quickly, but I just was hoping that you would hear that and kind of understand it and know where we're going with all of this, knowing that nobody's happy with a drop of 66 to 63. Nobody is. Our principals are hard on themselves. Our teachers are very hard on themselves. We don't even have to be hard on them because they already are. They want what's best for our students, and they're going to take all these things that we're putting in place right now and that we have for the second half of the year that we've already started to put in place. They're going to move forward with that. We all are. We're going to move forward with that, and things are going to really start moving in the right direction. So with that, I just wanted to make sure that I explained all of that the best I could. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to call me, email me. I'll meet with small groups. If you need more information, just let me know. And I just appreciate everybody listening to what I had to say today. So with that, thank you very much.
Mrs. Brown, did you have a comment?
Yes, I did. I received several calls. Well, thank you for the explanation on the grades, but I received several calls or discussions regarding the shooting in Uvalde, too. And I was relieved to know the quality of the officers that we have. I mean, some of them were actually teaching SWAT teams and things like that, but most of them had not only that kind of hands-on type of work, but they've also worked with kids. And I'm happy with what we're doing there. But I also told them that, you know, we had some of the parents of those kids that were in Parkland, that shooting, and they worked with the legislature and passed several of the laws that people are talking about now. They raised the age from 18 to 21 to buy those automatic weapons. And they also passed a red flag law that you don't have to be in an institution, you just have to be seeing something on or troubling things on social media that we can go in or with the court and ask to have guns removed. So that I think has helped. And then the state has put a lot of dollars into for mental health, which everyone has been talking about. And I know the social emotional learning that the teachers are working with so that kids can understand their emotions and learn how to deal with them in a positive way. So I think I allayed some of those fears, but I think it's good to let parents know. And I know when I go into schools, you know, you have to be buzzed in that single entry, and you can't just walk into a teacher's classroom anymore. You have to be let in, and there's that glass on the doors where you can't see in. And I'm sure that we will be working with our law enforcement over the summer to even have better training and learning more from what happened in Texas, some ways we can improve it. And so I'd like to thank you and also thank our officers and know that I have confidence in them.
Thank you, Mrs. Brown. Before we get started with public comments, I just wanted to let you know that Mrs. Goodwin is online. She's on Zoom and will be part of the voting process this evening. And before we get started, I would like to take a moment of silence in honor of the fallen victims of gun violence over these last many weeks. Thank you. At this point in the evening, we're going to hear from citizens wishing to speak who have completely filled out and submitted citizens' cards. If your full name is not written on the card or you have failed to complete and sign the card, your name will not be called. Please speak to the board and not the audience. As such, it is not a forum for attacking individual employees or school board members. Any such complaints should be submitted in writing to the superintendent. This is a business meeting of the school board, and the public expects that we conduct it in an orderly, efficient, effective, and dignified manner. We humbly ask that you would act as you were taught as a child. Finally, as public servants elected by the people of this county, we will listen with open minds and open hearts to your comments. We respect your First Amendment right to freedom of speech, and as a citizen of this great country, you must understand that your rights are not absolute. And so we begin. I'm going to call 3 people so that we can move through the public comments. There are 22 comments that have been cards that have been filled out. So the sooner everybody gets to their position, to the microphone, we want to make sure everyone is heard in the allotted time period. So when you get to the microphone, please announce your name once again, because it can be confusing that so many names will be called in order. So up first is Paulina Testerman, Rose LaChapelle, and Dr. Rebecca Lees.
Good evening. I'm Paulina Testerman. I'm the parent of 2 children who attend Sarasota County Traditional Public Schools, and I'm the co-founder of Support Our Schools. Last month, Governor DeSantis signed Senate Bill 758, which made Florida one of the few states that now no longer needs a local community's input on whether it wants a charter school opened in this area. The decision-making power is now in the hands of the state, and the state can now decide what's in Sarasota's best interest. Furthermore, in case anyone isn't paying attention, Governor DeSantis recently appointed an education commissioner for Florida who has deep roots in for-profit charter schools. How very convenient. In short, Florida just appointed a fox to guard the hen house. Before the state decided to castrate each county, Sarasota County School Board must vote on the last remaining charter school application that the county alone can decide on. That school is a for-profit school named Charter School USA. This would be the only for-profit charter school in Sarasota County. On behalf of Support Our Schools, we implore the board to do what's in the best interest of students and vote no on allowing Charter School USA to open in Sarasota. We refuse to hold the door for-profit charter schools who cut services, qualifications, and amenities to our students just so they can line their pockets with our tax dollars. Enough is enough. Our children are not for sale. Furthermore, let's make it clear to all for-profit charter schools considering coming to Sarasota. We are a community united against your cause. We will fight tirelessly to ensure that parents are so educated that your classrooms will lie empty. We will protest outside your schools. We will write editorials. We will send emails and letters and post on social media to ensure that parents know exactly how your companies steal from our children. Mark our words, we will not cower. There is no room for for-profit charter schools in Sarasota County. Thank you.
Melissa Bakandi.
Sorry. I'm Rose LaChapelle, and first of all, I want to thank you all for what you do. I really appreciate it. This is an open letter to school board member Mrs. Ziegler. Dear Mrs. Ziegler, you have been a strong advocate for parent rights and rights of all citizens to directly petition their government. Because of this, I trust that you share my concern that the school to be voted on tonight, the College Prep Academy at Welland Park, will make it difficult, if not impossible, to honor parental rights and the rights of a citizen to petition the governance of a school. First, the Welland Park School is a corporate managed school by Charter Schools USA. They control and manage all aspects of the school from its headquarters hundreds of miles away in Fort Lauderdale. The owner and CEO manages nearly 100 schools in 6 states, as well as the Red Apple Corporation that owns hundreds of millions of dollars worth of real estate. He is also owner and CEO of at least 6 other profit-making companies that services their school. We all know it's difficult to get accountability from a large corporation, let alone a financial empire. Second, the governance of Welland Park School is remote. The governance is a 5-member board of directors of people from multiple counties under the authority of an intermediary, the Florida Charter Education Foundation. This board meets monthly from the Fort Lauderdale headquarters. My concern is this: how will local parents, local citizens in Sarasota be able to petition this governing body? How will they be held to account? For these reasons, I believe you will do the right thing and deny the application. Thank you.
Barbara Vaughn.
Good evening. Thank you, Board, for this opportunity to speak. I'm here to register my objection to the Charter Schools USA, and this is based on a few points I have the time to go over here. One, I see this as a great duplication of services, and I think that is a major, major economic concern for all of us here as taxpayers. I live in Venice, I'm a full-time resident, and I just cannot understand a school being proposed for Welland Park, which is 2 miles from my home, when we're already going to build a high school there. So I think that's wasteful. I think it's bad business practice. Second, I'm concerned about the chain of command with this kind of school. They don't answer to you folks here, and I see that as a real problem. And so the faculty and curriculum decisions and so on, we know that historically, these kinds of schools, for-profit schools, have substandard faculty, substandard programming, and substandard facilities. Third is my own experience and expertise. I taught for 35 years. I taught 6 years at one of the top math and science schools in Pennsylvania, and 29 years at a Pennsylvania State University. And I earned my PhD in the School of Education at the University of Pittsburgh. So I have spent an immense amount of time studying education, pedagogy, and instruction and learning. And I just feel very, very strongly that we should put all of our efforts to making our schools really great here in the public school realm. Lastly, what a novel idea, this whole thing of for-profit. I just thought it was fascinating to see this all play out, because, you know, taking public monies to subsidize something that's private is quite a novel idea.
Kathy Antunes, you're on deck.
Could we keep it to just one person waiting behind? I didn't catch her name again, because it's...
Her name was Dr. Rebecca Lees.
Okay.
Next is Melissa Bacandi, Barbara Vaughn, and Kathy Antunes on deck.
School board members, Dr. Asplin. Agenda item 1, public notice. Ms. Goodwin has made it clear she wants no public input. That is why she's keeping emails and general comment from being put in the official minutes. Is this policy equitable? What about working parents and those who have disabled children that need one-on-one supervision, or those who cannot find a babysitter? Why should they be penalized for not being able to send in public comment via email? What are you afraid of? Greater transparency? Item number 54, superintendent raise. Under this superintendent, FSA scores are the lowest the school has ever seen, and students are leaving in droves to go to private schools. Perhaps it's because you masked our children and our reading programs are failing. Gas prices are almost $5 a gallon, and people are living paycheck to paycheck, and yet you want to give this failing superintendent a raise. No thanks. Number 57, new charter schools. Isn't it interesting that Ms. Goodwin doesn't want this charter because it's a national company? But yet Ms. Goodwin championed the national company Neola to hijack our school system with its liberal agenda-driven policy making. Ms. Goodwin, it's not the charter schools who have sold out our children. It is you. Number 58, new policy on respect in schools and student conduct. This is nothing more than another way to censor students and parents who disagree with your agenda. According to the new civility policy, I may be labeled as offensive or demeaning if I have a student enrolled at Booker High in Miss Gail Foreman's class, and I object to her giving extra credit for her students to volunteer at local gay pride events. Now, if I verbalize my objection and disdain for her pushing a liberal progressive sexual ideology, would I as a parent be labeled offensive, threatening, or demeaning and banned from campus? What if a student doesn't call another student by their preferred pronouns? Will they be reprimanded and labeled as harassing? What recourse does a parent have or a student when accused of these things by a staff member? This policy, just like the school board public comment policy, is very vague, subjective, and could very well be weaponized to censor parents who reject these progressive evil agendas in school. Yet again, this board has to silence the truth. That is the only way Ms. Goodwin can remain in power.
Thank you. Sally Nista on deck. Ms. Vaughn, I need to ask you a question so there's no confusion. You've indicated you want to speak on Agenda Item 4. Agenda Item 4 is actually the hearing of citizens, so it's not...
That's what I'm here to speak on.
I'm
is the
sorry, Ms.
hearing
Vaughn,
of
I'm not going to
citizens.
be able to permit that because then anyone could say that they're here to speak on hearing of citizens. So if you'd like to take your seat, we'll have you in general comments. Kathy Antunes?
I need to pray for this group.
I'm
before we
sorry,
go
it's
any
not
further.
it's not the way the policy is. We're happy to have you pray. We're not denying your prayer. It's just out of order.
Of course you are. That's what you do. That's
one more and you will have to be removed. Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. Kathy Antunes.
Evening. My name's Kathy Antunes. I wanted to share, I hope you deny the application from Charter Schools USA. There's a prominent thought leader, Christopher Rufo, whose work, a speech from April called Laying Siege to the Institutions, is featured in this month's Hillsdale College newsletter called Imprimis. He has the ear of elected leaders, including the governor, and this siege strategy is to defund public schools through universal school choice. He's very open about this. So if something is problematic, maybe a little broken, his solution is to destroy it. That is a bad strategy in a democracy to destroy public education. One corporate charter school president advised his administration in separate schools around the country to gather signed but undated letters of resignation from school board members, parents, who he made very clear it's okay for them to think that they have a role, but really these schools belong to us. The risk belongs to us. They're not in charge. So people who would say that parents' rights are at the forefront here, charter schools, corporate charter schools, diminish parental rights. The standards that public schools, real public schools, have to abide by don't apply in the same way to corporate charter schools. Profits come first. There is a very high failure rate. So I think it is incumbent upon this board to represent the interests of the citizens here, our tax dollars, and appropriate oversight, and to deny this application. Our governor has put in place a panel to circumvent your
Thank
authority,
you.
and that's wrong.
Rana Bazzini on deck.
Dear School Board and Dr. Asplin, I'm with Support Our Constitution. I don't understand the issue with the for-profit schools that would like to set up camp in Sarasota County. Here are my issues. Number one, what is Support Our Schools afraid of? I know that they hate giving parents choices. We saw that with the mass. Number two, this is a way to give Dan DeLeo more of my money because Support Our Schools has convinced our board to make yet another bad decision. Number 3, if Charter USA is as bad as they say it is, then it won't last long. Gotta love American capitalism. And parents can put their children back in their home school district. It's not a life-changing decision like gender transitioning. If the new school Sarasota is building just a mile away is really high-tech, innovative, modern, then they should pummel this charter school. It almost seems like Support Our Schools knows that parents don't like the current pride, sexualizing, grooming, indoctrinating agendas, so charter school is a threat. I hope this board will save my tax money, say yes to our schools prospering and being pushed to be better. Thank you.
Melanie Lipton on deck.
Good evening. My name is Rana Bazzini, and I am a resident of Sarasota. One advantage of aging is that people are forgiving if you repeat yourself. So please forgive me. I am repeating myself. I again request that you deny the application of Charter Schools USA, a for-profit charter school. You've already heard the many reasons that this application should be denied. I shall not repeat them. Its many deficiencies have been eloquently described by others. I was at the workshop where their representatives presented their case. I can honestly say it was the weakest presentation I have ever witnessed. One might conclude that it would be a dereliction of duty if this application should be accepted. You did the right thing in 2018 when you denied the application of Academica, another for-profit school. Once again, you have the opportunity to do the good thing and the right thing. Deny this application. A little interesting side bit. Jonathan Haig, the founder and CEO of Charter Schools USA, once had a yacht. It had the written on its transom, "Fishin' for schools." Our children are not bait. Please deny this application. Thank you.
Lisa Schur on deck.
Put on my glasses. Good evening. My name is Melanie Lipton. I'm asking you to reject the pending application from Charter Schools USA to open a charter school in Welland Park. Charter Schools USA extracts millions of public funds and puts these dollars into the pockets of their CEO. Public schools are already under stress. This is just a waste of taxpayer money. There's been many of these schools that have gone under in Florida, and what happens to those families when they go under and they just leave? That leaves a lot of people stranded. Just a side note on school safety. Of course, we're all thinking about Texas. The FBI teaches to run, hide, and then fight. I'm just wondering, are we teaching our kids to run? Are we just teaching them to hide? That's a question I want to ask you guys, because when I hear about them having these bomb threats, they go to the gym, and I'm like, well, the bomb radius is going to hit the gym, so it makes me nervous. Anyway, and also I supported masks. I believe in science. I know how viruses are spread, so thank you for actually doing the mask mandate. That was the right choice. Thank you. Thank you for all the work you guys do.
Ruth Beltran on deck.
My name is Lisa Schur. I have a child in the district, and I represent Support Our Schools. The school board has before it a charter grant application from the for-profit company Charter Schools USA, which I strongly oppose. We should not confuse nonprofit charter schools with for-profit charter schools like Charter Schools USA. In fact, they shouldn't be mentioned in the same breath. As required by law, the charter must be granted to a nonprofit legal entity. For purposes of this example, we'll just call it Welland Park. The scheme works like this. Charter School USA uses multiple for-profit companies that they own or control to provide services to Welland, like real estate development, lease of the real property, maintenance companies, landscaping, property management, security, all with a little markup tacked upon that. Management companies. Charter Schools USA receives $63 million in management fees from 56 of its schools in Florida. Other service companies provide services as well. To maximize profit, they also need to reduce operating expenses like paying teachers less, not providing transport to students, handpicking kids that will give the best test scores so they'll make more money. For-profit charter schools take the dollars that should be allocated to providing an education for our children and funnel them into the owner's pocket. Our children are not for profit, and every penny allocated for our children's education should be spent on them and not go into some millionaire's pocket. I'd like to have permission to approach the assistant and give her these cards. We've collected from, I don't know, a few hundred people that are asking you also to reject this application. Thank you.
Is Ruth Beltran in the room? Okay, Martha Kovalets and Norma Dayton on deck.
Good evening. I'm Martha Karlovitz, a resident of Venice, Missouri transplant, moved here in 2008, one full-time, one of the best decisions we ever made. And one of the reasons we chose this area was because of the excellent school system here. I'm a retired educator myself. I began teaching 7th grade social studies and developmental reading at the junior high level until I finished my master's in reading and went to the elementary level as a reading specialist. Appreciate Dr. Asplin's explanation of the reading scores and certainly admire the challenge the teachers and the kids had these last couple of years with the pandemic. I'm here to speak against the Charter Schools USA proposal. I think it's astonishing that they're planning a K-8 college preparatory academic school. Isn't that what all our schools should be heading for, not just one? I urge you to vote no on the Charter Schools USA, maintain a school board of Sarasota County residents, maintain a school that continues to have fully certified and licensed staff to ensure that all Sarasota County students continue to have excellent schools. Thank you.
Frederick Foreman on deck.
My name is Norma Dayton, and I thank you for this opportunity. My concern is the proposed for-profit charter school in Welland Park. The title should tell any intelligent voter that the purpose of the profit charter schools is to make money for benefactors, period. Public education dollars have been leaving the public schools and migrating to private and for-profit schools for many years around the country. We don't need to drain more money from our budget. As a taxpayer, I don't want my education dollars going to a corporation that has no allegiance to Sarasota County. Over the years, I have supported the $1 million increase in taxes to help fund extra programs for our schools. Our school board has an obligation to use our tax dollars wisely, keeping the funds directed toward our students and their needs, and it should be our highest priority. I hope you'll deny this application, and thank you.
Sandy Armstrong on deck.
Good evening, Superintendent, ladies and gentlemen on the board, audience. My name's, it's actually Rick Farmer, like Farmer in the Dell. I'm a retired school teacher. My wife and I both retired here in Sarasota County as school teachers. Children went to school here, public schools. My son's in medical school at USF. My other one has a great IT job up in Chicago. But my work in education has both been at charter schools and county schools. I've worked at Sarasota Military Academy for 4 years. I've worked at the VOTEC here in Sarasota, Manatee Technical Institute, Team Success, which is a charter school in Bradenton. But what I'm going to reflect on real quickly is my experience at Manatee Charter School. I worked there for a year as an IT and infrastructure manager. I did have a teacher certificate at the time. Went there from Sarasota Military. My wife worked there too when we get out. But I didn't have a very good view. I mean, I'm hearing a lot of different concerns about why we should or shouldn't have this charter school. And I am not against charter schools. I'm against Charter Schools USA because having worked there for a year, I just became concerned. The superintendent was talking a lot about these third graders back in the pandemic, but you should have seen what the teachers were going through. I mean, we're setting up stations where we would have students at home and in the classroom, and it was a mess. But a place like these Manatee Charter School and the support, I mean, most schools have all certified or almost all certified teachers, and the teachers write their own curriculums. I know I wasn't teaching there, but I was sure fixing the machines where they would print out all the curriculums in the morning and bring them to the teachers and to start the day. there's not a lot of learning going on there. There's infrastructure expenditures, there's metal doors that lock, there's cameras that can probably pick up a license plate. For those of you who don't know, there's about 105 of these schools like they're planning on building, and they all pretty much look alike. If you want to see one, drive up 301, Manatee Charter Schools on the right before Tropicana. Keep going, there's others in Brandon. I'm very against this amendment, and I want us to look at the value equation.
Mike Cosentino on deck.
Hello, Sandy Armstrong. Again, thank you all for all the hard work you do. I was very interested in the superintendent's discussion about reading skills. They're so important. And one of the reasons that I am against you voting for this Welland Park Charter School USA school is that I want my tax dollars to go to doing everything we can do to get these kids reading, to have good, strong support in our own schools, our public schools. And I'm very concerned that my tax dollars would be going to this as a private charter school. I understand there's going to be a public school built there, and maybe two, I'm not sure, at least one I know that's going to be built there. And I would like to support those schools, so thank you. And please consider that this is just not a good idea, and we need to, for sure, support our public schools. And every bit of my tax dollars, I want to go into supporting the children that we have in our public schools. So thank you very much.
Angela Wynn on deck. I just want to remind everybody that snapping fingers and clickers are not really advised. It's distracting for the people around you. Thank you.
Hey, Tom, fellow board members, Mike Cosentino, I appreciate the opportunity to address you today. I'm not sure about the protocol. I want to speak about charter schools, but I've got a little something extra that I want to throw in. Is to have to limit this to just charter schools?
Yes, and then we can bring you back again for general comments.
Okay. So my brother's, my nephew, my brother's kid is pretty severely autistic, and I know that our charter schools don't really have to accommodate folks with disabilities and things of that nature. And so for that reason and others, I ask that you reject this. Ask that you reject this petition. I just don't believe. I believe very strongly the Sarasota Military Academy is a great example of a public charter school, but I just do not support in any way, shape, or form private charter schools. Thank you for your time.
Angela Wynn, not in the room. Ali Abdel Kudar and Jan Kopel on deck. I'm sorry, that is Angela, correct? Yes. Yeah, okay. So, and then I have Ali Abdel Kudar on deck.
Hi, my name is Angela Wynn, and I just want to say thank you for letting me speak. I am the parent of a child in the Sarasota County Public School System. I'm here to speak out against allowing the for-profit Charter School USA to be put into South Sarasota County and to encourage you to deny its application. A charter school should not be considered a public school, especially not this one, and it shouldn't be afforded money as if it were one. This school would take money away from the public school system and not provide adequate, if any, services for our public school students, and I won't even speak to the way they treat their teachers and staff. I truly can't understand or see any reason at all for this school to be allowed into our county. Since when did it become okay for our children's education to be used to line the pockets of business owners? I just want to say, please, I encourage you all to deny its application. There's no reason, point, there's just for it to go into Sarasota County at all. We have enough public schools that already need to have the public funds. Thank you.
Are you Jan Capel?
Yeah, but,
okay.
But I didn't want to talk about charter schools. Should I come back later?
You have item 22, which is citizens. Oh, hold on one second.
Mine is more general comments, so
if it's a general comment, then I can move you back to the general comments at the end of the evening.
Okay.
Okay, and there's no Ali Abdel here, okay. Marcus Spiegelman, Alexis Spiegelman on deck.
Good evening. My name is Marcus Spiegelman. I live inside the district. I think I'm speaking about the numbers 13 and 18. Or
19, 13 and 19.
Both of them which relate in a way. And I know where all of you frankly stand on what I'm about to speak to. So frankly, Mr. Edwards, you're my only hope in this one since you listened to when I spoke about this issue last time. I know where everyone else particularly stands, but you're a kind of a swing vote. And that is regarding IT security and personal data being released into the public. We had this conversation as it related to Unite Us, and I don't want to get into whether I think the particular organizations that were the policy about the particular organizations. I'm talking about the data specifically. One of you mentioned that you thought it was unlikely that school districts would be compromised. 2 weeks ago, Chicago, 500,000 students through a third-party vendor through a data sharing agreement, all the data released. Couldn't happen to Sarasota, could it? But it did. First step of Sarasota in February, data released, student names, social security numbers, clinical data, private confidential information in this district. If you read the letter that went from First Step to the parents, you would be appalled. Only after that happened, they decide to install security updates and harden some of their systems, allegedly. The two agreements I reference, if you read those two agreements, it essentially says, we're going to share data with you, and then it's on you to maintain security. That's not really how this works. It's our responsibility to make sure that those who we release confidential information to have the infrastructure in place already to keep that data safe. That's why I suggested when it came to Unite Us, you verify that they have a SOC Type 2 report to verify that they had controls. To say, we're only going to send data to you using a secure FTP, and then from there it's on you to secure it, but not to understand whether or not they're downloading it onto a personal computer or a secure server.
Thank you. Alexis Spiegelman.
Thank you.
Good evening, Moms for Liberty, Sarasota. My name is Alexis Spiegelman. Regarding the charter school, we have a board majority that refuses to connect the dots between the growing number of taxpayers coming to these meetings unhappy with your job performance and the mass exodus of those same parents out of the Sarasota County School District. We had Ms. Brown last meeting said that she prioritizes comments from people with children in the school. The problem is you're not thinking about why so many parents have pulled their kids out of the school. We want accountability, but when you have an unelected establishment running our schools behind the scenes through all the various associations, foundations, and charities, and a school board chair who is the leader of the FSBA and is pushing the radical left-wing policy that is driving all of us to these very meetings, you do not have accountability because most parents have no idea what is taking place behind the scenes. Without ever disclosing what that Miss Goodwin is doing behind the scenes, she is pushing forth this LGBTQ agenda and all of the equity policy, and she said herself that she does it this way because it doesn't have to come before the board with a vote. Clearly, people are not happy about your job performance. Dr. Asplin, I sent you an article with the data on the reading recovery, and if you would have read it, then you would know that the results of the reading recovery, while you see initial gains after the third year, which is when we are seeing this drop, it's because you're not giving them skills for long-term improvement. You're teaching them how to read. It's a short-term fix without the long-term effect. I find it interesting that the FSBA also, you were in the original pool of candidates when we hired Tom Bowden, who was fired for sexual harassment. For all these people who are concerned about the money we're spending, $250,000 later, the same FSBA candidate search team brought us our second runner-up. So I'm not sure why anyone would be surprised with the results.
Teresa DeWitt.
Hello, it's Teresa DeWitt, and I would like to share with everyone today why I'm now considering a charter school. Last week, I was called by the ESC teacher to answer any questions about summer school. Through this conversation, I was told the following. I needed to drive through and drop my 5-year-old son off alone. I said no and was offered to walk to gate and to leave him with a stranger to escort to new teachers. I was told I would not meet her. I was told I could not escort to her class to give my 5-year-old a hug and lower his anxiety. I asked to observe one lesson of iReady and was told, no, nothing to see. If you want to do that, you can access at home. I was told he would not receive OT or speech for several weeks because they were busy. I was told that math would not be worked on because it was not on his IEP. However, Jane, I came and discussed his math iReady scores at the last board meeting. The teacher still refused after I explained. Dr. Asplin, I could say more, and you know I am committed to this school, and I'm an advocate. However, I'm getting reports from other students that are not allowed into first day of summer school. At this principal meeting that you held the week before school was out, did you instruct these principals to not allow parents on campus? What is going on in this school in terms of access? So I will end with this. Jane, this board approved for my twins to attend charter to receive services, and you approved summer school so they would not lose progress from 3 to 5. Transitioning to public school was exciting. However, at the end of the day, families are comprised and structured differently. The family should decide what will make the child most successful because children learn differently. We as a community should provide wraparound support in every educational environment. We must do this. Jane, this board was entrusted with my child's education. You are not entitled to their education. You have failed my child this year. I now will consider a charter. And I would like to ask everyone in this room, would you take your 5-year-old child, and when you take them to a new school, new teacher, new class, and not even be able to see their class? You would not.
That concludes the hearing of citizens. Thank you very much for your comments. Do we have revisions to the agenda?
Yes, we do. One addendum was added to item number 8, the instructional classified personnel report. Item number 11 was moved to new business, and now is item number 63, approval of resolution to increase educational impact fees. And then the agreement was added to item 61, approval of settlement agreement to conclude litigation.
Excuse me, before we go, Mr. Superintendent, when a parent brings a specific issue about a student, don't we have somebody look at, or are you following up on that afterwards?
Yes, we'll be following up with that.
Thank you.
Mrs. Ziegler?
Oh, well, I can wait until, well, I'll start. There were a couple items, and I know I spoke with the superintendent about this, and we had on Friday, and I know it was mentioned at public comment, and I do think it is paramount when we talk about the IT security components, the contracts, and the transfer, just because we talked more hypothetical last time. There were indeed third party that did have a data breach that were up for approval again today. And I know Dr. Aspen, I'd mentioned if that could be addressed today, any mechanisms that have been enhanced since then because it's being brought before the board. I know we talked about that on Friday. Is that available for the board?
Is Dawn here today? Is Dawn in here? There you are. You come forward. Dawn can speak to the language as far as indemnification. As far as technology is concerned, I'm going to have to get back to you on that one.
And the agenda item, please, we're referencing?
Oh, well, there's a couple. I'm sorry. Sorry, Dr. Clayton. There are
18 and 19 is
13 and 19.
19 is one for sure. And I'll pull up the other one. Sorry, it just froze on me here.
13.
The data sharing, I thought, was 18 and 19. It's 13.
I'm sorry.
13 that a citizen referenced was the approval of agreement between the Florida United Methodist Children's Home. 19 is...
I didn't think that was data sharing. I thought it was 18 and 19 that were data sharing.
Data sharing is 19 between grant writing, evaluation, and program improvements consultants, and 18 is Big Brothers and Big Sisters data sharing.
Dr. Clayton?
27. And I'm sorry, board members, the 27 is the agreement with First Step. And 28.
Okay. Hello. Can you hear me now? Okay, great. So I can speak to the First Step Agreement for 27 and also for 28. What I wanted to say about that is that the contracts, they do have that hold harmless language in there. I'm not able to quote it. Obviously I don't have that in front of me right now. But the other big thing with the First Step Agreement is that it is all done with parental consent. Students that are involved in these two particular First Step programs that are on the contract tonight are all done with an abundance of informed consent of the parent. If there are any other specific questions related to what information is shared or what that looks like after the parent gives the consent, we do have members from the First Step organization here tonight who'll be able to hopefully speak to that as well.
Mrs. Ziegler?
No, thank you so much. Two things. I'm glad to know about the parental consent, which I always push on. I know I'm not familiar with any issues with First Step. I know there was an issue this past year, and it was ironic because it was almost verbatim of what I hypothetically said was potentially could happen, and it did. And I believe there have been steps of improvement that the superintendent has shared with me that have occurred. So I think when we have these conversations, that the public be aware of certain improvements. There are things that do also still give me pause, though, as it pertains to any of the third-party agreements that we have. Again, this has been brought up again. There is a real aspect of cyber and security issues. We don't have I caught it with my arm. We don't have managerial oversight of our third-party institutions, but we are sharing highly sensitive information, particularly when we're talking about mental services, health services, mentor services. I mean, there's a myriad of them. And so I'm sorry, you're getting on the spot. I know that Dr. Aspin, we have spoken about that. And I think, again, in conjunction with, I understand these organizations provide a valuable service. So I want to make sure that there's two components we're talking about right now. From a business standpoint, from a fiduciary, from a safety, all of those things, there was a cyber breach with one of our third-party institutions that they did notify the people who were victims of it as required by law. But we contract with them, and that's up right now. And I don't know if any of those protocols, and this is probably more of an IT question or a legal question. I know, Dr. Aspin, we spoke about this. So it puts us in a tough spot if we don't know if we've evaluated it, ensured the security aspects, strengthened the processes or language. And so I guess that's not necessarily a question for you, Dr. Clayton. It's probably more of a legal and an IT question. But I know what we talked about this on Friday. So I'm concerned if we don't have at least a verification that we can speak to this even publicly, or if anyone up here can verify that any improvements have been made.
Mm-hmm. So would it help if I kind of clarify what these two particular programs are? Because First Step does work in our schools, and they do have several different contracts, and I just wanted to clarify what these two programs are. That's
okay, sure.
Okay, so there's the First Step Student Assistance Program contract that you have up before you today. This is a program that we offer to students. It is all done 100% with parental consent, informed parental consent. It's in compliance with the Parents' Bill of Rights as well. And what happens with the Student Assistance Program is many of the students that are in this program, they need help with things that are interfering with their ability to learn in school. Parents sign off on this. They agree to participate in it. It could be an issue with the student who is experimenting with drugs, unfortunately, or there's something else that the parent is asking for support with the student assistance program, where they do work with our students to help them be able to remain in their current educational setting and not have to go through an alternative education route through one of our other experiences. And when that program kicks into place, it's only done with the parent consent. And then First Step has a process of keeping that data. Now, you have some very technical questions, which I respect, Mrs. Ziegler. I do respect the questions that you have. The Drug-Free Youth Program, it's an incentivized program for our students to remain drug-free throughout their high school years. So for students to be able to get, to go to different businesses in the community with steep discounts and to do other things motivational to encourage kids to remain drug-free as well. So those are the two contracts that are up tonight for the First Step program. And I do know that First Step does exist in our schools in other ways as well.
Mrs. Rose?
Mrs. Ziegler, did you have a?
I was going to say, Dr. Clayton, thank you. I know this is kind of thrown at you, and yes, again, thank you for highlighting the work that they're doing because that is a very important part of it.
Yes.
And I appreciate the recertification about the parental consent piece. As of course, I appreciate that. The only, and this is not directed at you, I think that where I'm at coming from is, in particular, I believe that anytime we engage a third party, particularly from the school district, I would assume our due diligence is required to ensure those certain protocols are in place. And that is where this was going because there was a security breach and we are familiar with it. And so wanting to be able to address if there are any enhancements legally or from an IT standpoint or from a risk transfer standpoint, since we talked about it before, never thought it could happen. It happened. Same thing with the parental consent piece. I understand there's been improvements there, so that's why I use that as a comparison. So I guess that's where my question falls.
But I can answer some. First of all, the legal piece, the hold harmless and indemnity piece that we did speak of, that is something that our attorneys can address and did address and put this paragraphs in each one of those particular contracts. I know they're in there. If we're going to talk about the IT piece, that's a different discussion. I'd have to have Mr. Binswinger in here to talk through that, but I can speak with him and have him investigate that and come back and we can give you answers to that later.
I do have Ms. Canalupo online now for you to answer some questions. Ms. Canalupo, you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. There were some specific questions. Ms. Ziegler, I'm not sure if you want to re-ask those since she's on. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you. No, I in the simplest format, we are revisiting another additional contracts with third-party vendors, many of whom we've had long relationships that provide wonderful services. I want to make sure I make that clear. But there were some elements over the past year that Dr. Asplin, I know you're familiar with when it comes to security, IT, and hold harmless agreements. Has anything changed? Have they been improved since last year?
Our data security agreements is what, or data sharing agreements is what I believe. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Our data sharing agreements are in place, have gone through legal team. And why do we have those? We have those so that we have the proper security in place for those individuals that are providing services to us. Oftentimes there are grants and there are foundations that are providing services to us, but in order to receive those services, we have to provide information to them. So we have these very secure agreements in place, and our IT team definitely works with these folks with data transfer and so forth. Often, and most often, our data is only transferred under what we, the student's N number. So identification in terms of students' names, et cetera, is deleted. The data files are in terms of if anybody really looked and read them, are not identifiable by an individual student's name. So these individuals are running analysis and providing group information. It's the only way that we can transfer data is through these secure FTP sites. And in terms of improvement, we've always been held them secure. I know there was mentioned a little while ago about First Step. That was not our information that we transferred. That was not from us.
Thank you, Dr. Canalupo. Mrs. Rose?
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Is this an item that we need to pull and get further information on? I feel like and I'm asking for legal advice as far as protocol. Could there be a motion? This is, my understanding, isn't in a contract for immediately right now, of considering there was a data breach, it was a concern of our community, regardless of whether it was our data or not. It is an organization that we're partnering with, and as far as Social Security numbers go, once your Social Security number is out there, it's not necessarily, it can be used regardless of whether your name is attached to it. So I understand the concern. I've had identity theft. It's horrible. So can I make a motion? I'm asking for protocol to pull these and get further information into how secure our information is that is being shared with First Step.
Mr. Chairman, yes, that would be within the discretion of the board to continue the item to the next meeting if they felt like they needed more information.
If I may, and we certainly will provide that at a workshop in the future, we don't transfer ever Social Security numbers. We use A numbers, which are non-identifiable numbers. We do not use Social Security numbers.
So there are no remaining Social Security numbers left in our system whatsoever that
we would transfer.
But there are remaining Social Security numbers. They're just not what we would transfer. Am I hearing that?
Yes, ever. We would never transfer Social Security numbers.
I have two folks that have chimed in, two board members, but I'm going to speak on some qualification here so that we identify a few things. My understanding of data sharing is that what Dr. Cantalupo has said is that when the information that we have leaving the school district going to what is typically a grant that we agree to by receiving that grant, we share data, which does not include the student's name or any identifiable information. Is that true, Dr. Cantalupo?
Yes.
Excuse me, that's not what the agreement says.
I'm sorry, sir. I appreciate your comment. I really do. It's right here on the top, and I'm following through with it. But in terms of the agreement between First Step, and that is data that's going out that does include that information, and that in either case, if that particular organization is hacked, then the information is vulnerable. Was it the SAP program, Dr. Clayton, that is where the breach occurred last year?
No, sir, there is no breach that I'm aware of with the SAP program.
Okay, thank you. I would follow through on Ms. Rose's idea for a motion. I'm feeling mostly concerned about the IT aspect, not about data sharing. I'm concerned about the IT piece that can't be addressed tonight. So that would, for purposes of making a motion, Mrs. Rose, it's item 13, 18, 19, 27, and 28.
If I may, I think that's a good idea. If I may, I think it's a good idea to investigate further. I don't know about the SAP breach. If there was one, I don't think so at all, but the First Step breach, we can certainly investigate it and talk about it at a later date.
I second the motion.
Do you want to hear on the comments before we vote on the motion? There's more comments here. Mrs. Brown?
Apologies.
I have a question of Ms. Cantalupo, and that is, and Dr. Aspin, will we be able to put this on the June next week's agenda for the workshop so that we can get it back on the next agenda item to vote on in July so that they'll have this information to start school?
I'll obviously do my best to get that on for the 21st. This is a lot of information that we're going to have to go through and look at with Joe Binswinger, and we will certainly start doing that first thing tomorrow.
Mrs. Ziegler.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it, and to my colleagues, and I appreciate it highlighting it again. This was something that had been raised a couple times, so I do think it is our responsibility to do the due diligence. So, I think what we have a motion, a second to suspend those items and move them to the workshop. Is that?
You have one more comment.
I do.
Oh, my bad. Sorry.
Mrs. Goodwin.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I can't believe that we haven't closed the loopholes on all of this, either legally or from an IT perspective, before we brought it to the board. How do you feel about this, Denise?
Anything that had to do with data security in terms of data transfer, we've gone through our legal teams. First, Art Hardy, and then lately, every agreement goes through our legal team.
Well,
So,
that's what I thought. And, you know, I don't want to throw one of our partners under the bus wrongly, because we have people who are always picking up on rumors in the community. And that is something that we do not want to do. We do not want to add that layer to this whole issue. And I know that we have a lot of things on our agenda for next week, along with a pretty aggressive board meeting on the 21st. Dr. Asplin, what do you think?
I think I will have the IT department take a look at the information that's in question, and we will try to close that gap as soon as possible and get it on the 21st. If not, we'll have to go into July.
How time sensitive is this?
Ms. Clayton, how time sensitive are these?
I'm all for transparency of process, so if we're able to get it back on the agenda, if it doesn't go through tonight, I'd like to be able to do it as soon as possible, because with both of those programs, there's summer planning that happens so that we can be started, you know, for the start of the school year. So certainly we can, you know, entertain that conversation, you know, at hopefully the next possible time. So it is a time-sensitive thing. Ideally, we should be set up for the start of the new school year and have this situated by the end of July, if we can.
Mrs. Goodwin,
Thank
if
you.
I may.
Yes, thank you.
I will tell you that the Unite Us process went through all of the processes that we're talking about, and to Mr. Spiegelman's credit, he pointed something out that needed buttoned up, and it missed legal and it missed IT, and I asked the right question per Mr. Spiegelman, and we fixed it, and Unite Us passed. So it doesn't require a deep dive for me. I know what questions to ask IT to make sure that everything's buttoned up correctly, and I don't think it requires, if those answers come back soundly, as I'm hoping they will, then it doesn't require a whole, 10, 15, 20 minutes of chit-chat at a workshop. I think we can get through it pretty quickly.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just, for the sake of orderliness, suggest that the motion be to continue this item specifically to the meeting on the 21st. So there's no question of notice or advertising or anything like that.
Do you want to amend your motion?
Yes, I will amend my motion to specifically be addressed on the 21st.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, Mrs. Brown?
Yes.
Mrs. Ziegler?
Yes.
Yes.
Mrs. Goodwin?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Motion carries. That being said, can I have a motion for the approval of the remaining consent agenda?
I move the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
Any discussion? We'll go for a voice vote. Mrs. Brown?
Yes.
Mrs. Ziegler?
Yes.
Mrs. Rose?
Yes.
Mrs. Goodwin?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. Now we're into new business. First up is item 55, that the superintendent receive a $12,000 increase to his base salary. May I have a motion?
I move the approval of the change in the salary.
Second, that's a good one.
Any discussion?
I'd like to discuss something.
Fire away.
Good one. I would just like to say that Dr. Asplin has worked hard over these almost 2 years, but does it seem like 2 years, Dr. Asplin? Perhaps not, but.
Gone by pretty quickly.
It has gone back quickly. But I just wanted to say that I think he has earned our respect. I think he has earned our the raise that we are giving him. He has worked very, very hard. We have a strategic plan now, and we are going to be the most, one of the most, if not the most excellent, which we hope for, school district in the state in a very short period of time. And I think a lot of that is attributed to he and his cabinet and all of the other workers in our school district, teachers, staff combined, who work very hard every day to make our students successful. And it's all about the kids, and we know that. And Dr. Asplin is all about the kids. So I want to thank you, and I want to say my hat's off to you, and I hope you have a long and happy career here in this district.
Thank you, Ms. Goodwin. I appreciate that.
I want to follow that up with also, I apologize that this raise is coming late. I think that I'm learning that our contract with you should have been buttoned up a little better, and I's and T's dotted and crossed. And I too admire the fact that we weathered the FSA scores as we did, and we still have that strategic plan. We brought you in from St. Johns County to execute to that plan, and I'm looking forward to a long career with you here in the school district.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. I appreciate that too.
Any more discussion? Mrs. Ziegler?
Thank you. I just want, I think there's rightfully so, some confusion. So, and I wanted for anyone watching or here tonight to just recertify that this is, as Mr. Edwards mentioned, this raise is for the prior year. We are, as a board, very, very, very behind on this aspect. And I would agree. I think there's been a lot of conversations about let's do something quicker. Let's have that process. It has not happened. So moving forward, just to reiterate, the superintendent received a highly effective score for the 2021 year. This is in response to that, not in relation to this current year, and that will be evaluated separately. The only other caveat I wanted to point out is so that we do not fall into this trap again, and I know we've mentioned this before, and it's incumbent upon the chairs to put the certain items together. And so it's my understanding at the workshop next week, we will be addressing the contract change so that we are moving along and not going to be backwards in time. Is that accurate? Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Ziegler.
Mrs. Brown?
Just for clarification on why, we've got a raise now that goes back to July 1 is we do not come up with the raises for our employees until after we get the grades in from the state, which comes in late in the fall. And then there were some wrangling on how to do it this year, and we should have done the superintendents probably shortly thereafter, after we did the rest of the staff. But again, I think it's been a troubling year for the whole district, and a lot of that was on his shoulders. And based on the highly effective rating he received last year, he deserves this raise.
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
Mrs. Goodwin?
I would just like to add to that yes, we will have a contract, an amended contract for review by the board next week. And we will go into a fall evaluation, since we will have all the data that we need to evaluate the superintendent, not July 1 as our fiscal year starts. but in the fall so that it's done before October. And that will give us the ability perhaps to have some issues with our union contract and other things made a decision on as well. So Dr. Asplin and I and the legal team have met, and we're prepared to get that to you all hopefully soon. Dr. Asplin, how are we doing with that? I know
Yes,
we still have some performance issues with Mrs. Cantalupo, Dr. Cantalupo, but other than that, we should have that for you later this week, I would hope.
Yes, and hopefully I'll be able to meet with you tomorrow. I just received it late this afternoon, back from the attorney looking at that, and so I'll be able to talk to you about it tomorrow.
Any other discussion on item 55? Let's have a vote. Mrs. Brown?
Yes.
Mrs. Ziegler?
Yes.
Mrs. Rose?
Yes.
Mrs. Goodwin?
Yes.
And I'll follow that with a yes. Item 56, may I have a motion?
I move the approval of the new job description for child care specialist.
Second.
Any discussion? Let's have a vote. Mrs. Brown?
Yes.
Mrs. Ziegler?
Yes.
Mrs. Rose?
Yes.
Mrs. Goodwin?
Yes.
And I'll follow that with a yes. Item 57, may I have a motion?
One way or the other. Yes, ma'am. They're entitled to review by a certain date. Punt this one.
Well, knowing that we legally have to do this, I will make the motion. I recommend, well, I recommend that we do not approve.
Yep, you have a couple of choices. You could say you move it for discussion, or that you make a motion that it be denied.
I move that we open the approval or denial of the College Preparatory Academy at Welland Park, open for discussion.
I'll second.
So you're moving for the denials, so a no vote would be an approval, is that correct?
No, I opened it for discussion. My amendment was opening it up for discussion.
Mrs. Rose?
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. I would like feedback from legal counsel, please. Given our legal requirements, do we have the option without liability of denying this?
I'm going to defer to my colleague, Mr. Duggan, who I believe is fully prepared on this question.
Hi, everybody. Patrick Duggan here. You have three options. You have received an application. You can approve it, deny it. If you do nothing, that counts as a denial. I think your question was about whether there is liability. It's essentially a three-part process. This being part one, where the board would make one of those decisions. If it was denied or if it was not acted upon, which would be treated as a denial. There theoretically, if the charter school chose to do so, is a remedy on appeal to the State Board of Education. We would submit information to them. It would go through the Charter Commission, who would make a recommendation to the State Board of Education. Ultimately, the State Board of Education would evaluate all of the information and issue an opinion on the charter school. And then the non-prevailing party of that action would have the opportunity to appeal that to the District Court of Appeal. And then that decision ultimately would be the final decision if all of those steps played out. So that would be the process.
And any costs associated with that if we were to not prevail?
So in this per statute, which is 1002.33, there is a provision that permits the prevailing party to seek recovery of their costs and attorney's fees through the entire application process and all of those appeals from the non-prevailing party. So what that means in layman's terms is you would be paying your own lawyers, and if you ultimately did not prevail, there is a good argument that you would be paying the other side's lawyers as well.
And I understand that you've reviewed the application from a legal counsel standpoint, of which I rely on, have they met the legislative criteria, which we are held to?
Okay, so I did review the application, and I have shared my thoughts with each of you within the attorney-client privilege, and I'm certainly willing to reveal those thoughts. I think there's pros and cons to doing that, but if a majority of you wish for me to reveal my thoughts on the application, I'm happy to do that here. I don't want to do that out of turn.
Well, may I ask this? If they were to initiate a charter school, and I just want to qualify that we haven't had this opportunity, so please allow me, Chair Edwards, to proceed just a little bit. We haven't had an opportunity for these deep dive into this important decision. If they were to initiate a charter close to where we do have plans to build a school, and it wasn't profitable for them and they were to leave, would there be a cost element for us? Would we experience a loss in any funds or anything on our behalf as far as our obligations?
So as I understand it, and this is outlined in the statute, any funds that they have in their possession would be diverted to the school board. And you had asked me earlier about what would happen to the facilities. Since our conversation on that earlier tonight, I went and looked at the statute, and what I learned was that per statute, there are several options. Any facilities would revert to the school board, subject to any debt on those. So we would take on the property and the debt with it. Or another option would be the owner of the property, which sometimes is the charter school, sometimes not, would have the ability to pay back any funds that were used regarding that facility and retain, ownership of that property. Or there could be a third option, which would be a resolution or an agreement between the parties per contract. So a lot of flexibility here about what would happen, but I don't know that any of them would result in the school board being necessarily out of pocket for facilities.
I do have concerns with the quality of the school. My commitment to this community is not only the fiduciary responsibility that, and I know this isn't part of the legislative process, it's part of my commitment that that we are providing. I believe in options, I believe in choice, and for families to have that and match success for their child. I am concerned about the success record, the off-site potential of board members of this charter, and I couldn't narrow them down, nor in the paperwork could I honestly say that this is the kind of quality I would expect. There's a concern for me, and then I just have one last question, and that is from our superintendent, and what is his recommendation?
Well, first of all, based on what you were talking about just a moment ago, Ms. Rose, from an academic standpoint, yes, I would not approve this this particular charter. As far as a charter that gains profit as well, I would not recommend. After listening to what Mr. Duggan was saying, as far as that it will be probably appealed and then cost us possibly quite a few $100,000, possibly, in an appeal situation, that's the only reason that I would say yes, because we don't want to spend a couple $100,000 on something that we're going to lose based on the research that has been done by our attorneys. But as far as a school is concerned, and the fact that they're a profit type of school, and the academics and the certifications that the teachers do not have, and some of the other things that we talked about in the workshop, I would say that we need to deny this application.
So, and I apologize, just one last thing. I just want clarification from legal, that are you saying that we could possibly take on debt if they pull out, or are you saying that we wouldn't?
Well, I mean, I guess the debt we would take on would be related to the facility. If we also took on the facility, we would be taking the facility with any mortgages on it. So if there was equity in that facility, presumably we would be taking on something that has value. If there's no equity in it, or it's upside down, we theoretically would be taking on that debt. But I think there's other options, I guess.
Thank you.
Mr. Duggan, on research of charter schools that have appealed, have any of them lost?
So my research was pretty thorough. I looked at several opinions, and what I found was that the charter schools tended, when a school board denied the application at the school board level as part one, it goes, obviously part two to the State Board of Education. My research found that that was a pretty favorable forum for the charter school at the state level. And on appeal to the District Court of Appeal, I would say there was some that ultimately were ruled in favor of the school district and to deny the charter application, and there were some that upheld that, and the ones that upheld it, obviously, so I'd say it's about 50-50.
So if that's revealing to me tonight, I would say, because that isn't what I had heard. So that's a concern of mine, which I will bring up at a later date.
It comes down to, so they're not just flipping a coin. They're looking at the statutory criteria, and they're deciding ultimately at the court level whether the statutory criteria has been met or not.
Okay. And another question that I have is, did we, to your knowledge, have a conversation with the Department of Education, because a law was passed that as of July 1st, this is no longer a board responsibility. The local authority of school boards to approve or deny charter schools, as per the new law that was passed in Tallahassee and signed by the governor, that we no longer have that authority as of July 1st. Is that correct?
So, yeah, so that law that was passed, well, at least it gave an avenue for the charters to go directly to Tallahassee and bypass this process. That law was signed by the governor in June and becomes effective July 1st. However, in checking with Tallahassee, that is what's called a legislative law that has to be implemented with rules by the Department of Education. And not my personal conversation, but the conversations that the district had, they learned that process they anticipate will take several months, and that the status quo will remain in effect for the time being until they do implement the new rule-based process at the Department of Education.
So they're kicking the can back to us, even though they passed a law that says it's no longer our responsibility. Is that how you would interpret that?
I would interpret it as it's taking them time to implement the legislature's desire, and that takes some time for them to, for example, appoint board members to the state commission that's going to handle it. Like I said, don't shoot the messenger on that.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm just pointing out the hypocrisy and the idiocy of what we're going through here. We all are sitting here pretty much agreeing that this is not the caliber of school that belongs in our district. We're all, and we've heard from our community pretty resoundingly. But at the same time, they've met the 5 criteria, which would mean if they go through their 2-step appeal process, that the state is going to go ahead and approve them anyhow, to the tune of, I believe I heard, $500,000 that the school district would absorb if the Charter School USA prevailed. So between their attorney fees and our attorney fees, it would be approximately $500,000.
Okay, so speaking in generalities to protect the opinion I've given within that privilege, what I found in my research was that in the situations where the charter school ultimately prevailed, it was because they met the statutory criteria. And in my research of trying to figure out what attorney's fees were awarded in those situations, what I found that there were awards somewhere between the mid to high 100,000s to the low to mid 300,000s, just in an award to the charter school. That did not take into consideration what the award would be or what the cost would be for your own lawyers to litigate those matters in those proceedings. And it's hard to predict because I don't know who will appeal, what issues will be raised, that type of thing. But I would say 500,000 would be a worst case scenario, but it is somewhat possible you could get to that figure.
Thank you. I have more to say, but I get frustrated when board members take up too much time, so I'm going to pass it to Mrs. Brown.
I have a few questions for our legal. When you did your research on schools that were denied by districts, did you include the denials that were in Sarasota County and how those played out?
What I did is I pulled all of the ones I could find. So ultimately, the attorney's fees go through what's called the DOA process, the Division of Administrative.
Oh, so you only looked at those that were appealed. You didn't look at those that were denied and they did not appeal.
No, I looked at the court opinions that were issued by the District Court of Appeal at step 3, which then kind of describe what the prior history is. I also looked at the DOA proceedings.
But you did not look at those that were denied and not appealed. So you don't know what that number is, correct?
I don't know what that number is.
Well, in Sarasota, the last several, and I believe there were 4, 5, 6 that we denied that were not appealed.
Okay, yeah, I don't know what the...
I mean, so just because we deny it doesn't mean it is going to be appealed. So we can do our due diligence here today and make our decisions. And if Charter Schools USA comes back and appeals, well, then we can come back and have a discussion on if we want to do something else. But Charter Schools USA could then decide, well, you know what? They're making some points, or maybe we really don't want to be there, or maybe we want to go through this new process and not even try to replicate the K-8 one that we were doing in Clay County, because they did get a C last year. And are they still an A district? I know the state counts them as an A district, but they got a C last year, and that would take them out of a school that could be replicated. So, I mean, I have that issue out there, but I don't think that we ought to assume they're going to appeal, because the last 4, 5, or 6 that we denied did not get appealed. And that's a possibility. What really concerns me is your answers to what Ms. Rose said, and that's what happens to the building. There is no way in high heaven that I would want to take on the responsibility. We're building a school there. We're going to have our own school there. So we open our school, and maybe half of the kids from that charter school move over to our school, and so their school fails. Why on earth would we want to take on another building in the same subdivision that's replicating what we've got? If in fact that might be what we may have to do, then I might even change my mind on whether or not I would want to go forward with an appeal. Because I do not in any way want to have to take on the debt or responsibility of another building for K-8 education down in Welland Park. No way. And you say that the money will come back to the school. Well, that might be what any money that they have. But what happens is the money goes to the school, and after we don't get that money on a daily basis for these kids. That money comes in chunks. And if they get that money and we get the kids the next week, we have to educate those kids on our dime. We have to find spaces for them. We may then be out of compliance with class size amendment because we can't find places to put all of those kids. It's not an easy thing. I don't care what the legislation says. We can't find spaces for all those kids in that short of time, and we won't get the money. The money will not come. I mean, they won't come with their little bags of money. It doesn't happen. Oftentimes, the charter school keeps it. I mean, maybe they can tell me how there was a charter school that failed, that closed, and that all the money went back to the public schools. I haven't seen that yet. Maybe it's out there. And I welcome any charter school that's out there, private charter school, for-profit charter school that did that. I welcome Charter School USA to show us, because some of their schools failed. Show me how you've done that. Put it in your contract that you'll do that for me. And there's a lot of other contract questions that we had about what they were asking that I'm going to have questions for of the people who made the presentations, because we had questions then that we had asked for answers. I didn't receive anything in writing from anybody. And so perhaps whoever has been on this, maybe Denise Cantaloupe, can answer some of those questions for us. And believe me, Patrick, you know me, you know I get excited. Nothing personal.
Yeah. No offense taken. Like I said, don't shoot the messenger. I'm
I know.
mostly just
I
summarizing
know.
what the very, very lengthy charter school statute said.
And believe me, I did try to control my voice. That's all I have for you right now.
Mrs. Goodwin.
Mrs. Goodwin.
Maybe I can answer something for you. That building is owned by Red Apple. It is owned by another company that John Hayes runs. That building won't come back to us. That's the same thing as Benderson owning the Imagine Schools in Northport. If the Imagine Schools, which is a for-profit, we do have a for-profit, it is the Imagine Schools in both Palmer Ranch and Northport. And if they, I don't know who owns, because I couldn't ever find the shell companies that it went through in Palmer Ranch, but it looks like it's Benderson in Northport. And so that's a whole different kind of a scheme. So those buildings would not be coming back to us. They would become, who knows, a mall, a shopping center. Who knows what it would become, a different kind of school, I'm not sure. But it would be hopefully recouping any revenues. And we don't have any responsibility. To do anything, but here's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about those students that haven't gotten a good education coming back into our school district. So the 19 things that we have on an application, we had 14 that we did not approve in the year 2014 alone. So there's been upwards of close to 20 charter schools that we have not approved. And the issue that I addressed or looked at were three things: transportation, budget, and curriculum, because those are the most important things. They don't need buses because everybody's going to walk, I guess, or mom and dad are going to carry them. That causes a question for me. How are children going to get to that school? Many kids today don't ride their bikes or walk. And I think, are people going to want to go to the school? That's a big question. But one of the items that scared me the most was $400,000 in the budget that was for Title I students. How are they going to get Title I students there? That is a big question for me, and that's a lot of chunk of budget. The CSP grant, which is the grant that comes from federal government to help charter schools get started. Joe Biden is not crazy about for-profit charters. There is evidence that he is not going to approve those. That makes it more difficult for them to open a school. I will say that to you. The technology component, where and who will support it. We have got Charter School USA schools in Manatee and in Hillsborough that aren't doing well. And then there's the wonderful Clay County, and looking at Clay County specifically, and I talked to school board members and other people there, the curriculum. It looked to us in the application as though this was boilerplate. And they didn't get a grade last year, but their numbers adding up to what, 400 and low 400s out of 900 would state as Mrs. Brown said, a C. And so they are, looking forward. I tried to see third grade grades, but they're not posted on the DOE, the kind that we've already gotten. I couldn't find that. But the IEP and the whole world of special needs students, they're primarily deficient in. A lot of their teachers are not certified at that school in Clay County. They haven't had a board meeting, I understand, all year. And it's not a model of good fiduciary or curriculum pedagogy experience. And what happens to those students when they leave the 5th grade or they leave the 8th grade? Where do they go? They come to our schools. And, kind of a student will they be? The teachers that we have hired, making right now $50,000 to start, they've already said they can't pay that. Well, where are they going to find teachers? They're not going to find certified teachers. That's probably an understatement. And as many as 40% of the teachers in the Clay County school was not certified. And this is just some things that I got from a report that was done early in the year. So they may not be high performing anymore for long. And I have some great concerns about this model. And once they get in the community, then others will come along as well. And this is the whole choice movement. Choice is really about destroying public schools. And what we have is we've scaled up all we can scale up in voucher programs for private schools. Many vouchers were taken up by students who are already in private schools this past year. And now we have to scale up in the charter domain, and for-profit charters, that looks pretty good. So this is what's going to happen in communities across Florida. And with Manny Diaz as the Commissioner of Education, who comes from Academica, and others there that are on this Charter Revision Commission, 4 people from the charter school world, 4 people from the public school world, but they are perhaps not going to have that up and running for 6 months, is what I'm hearing, 6 months to a year. So I thought that we could make this decision because it is not July 1st, and I thought the old rules would be applicable. And I say, let's go ahead and see what happens. Toss the dice. But I'm certainly recommending and will not be approving this charter school to come into our district. It goes against everything that I hold near and dear to my heart. And, it comes back to my favorite expression. Do you do things right, or do you do the right thing? And the right thing is to not approve this charter school.
Mr. Chairman, are we going to get an answer from staff regarding those questions about that $400,000 for Title I and how they responded to those questions about the ESE? And I think teachers, they must be certified teachers, but they were having out-of-field certification, I think was what the issue was. Are we going to get staff to answer those questions?
I know we have Dr. Cantalupo on the line, but I have
Millie.
and Millie Wheeler is here. But before we go to that, I have 2 other people that are queued in. Mrs. Ziegler.
No, thank you. I think a lot of the, a lot of the questions and concerns have been raised. I think, I mentioned this to Dr. Asplin, was usually the process would be preliminary. And by the way, I want to thank staff again, because I know there is an incredible amount of work that goes into this, that they dive into for the element of to help us, the board, make a decision, but it's also to educate and inform the public about what may transpire, where the deficits are, where the strengths are, what have you. And so, and yes, as Mrs. Brown pointed out, we've had, since I've been on the board, I remember that first year there were something like 17 charter school applications. None of them, and not because we declined them. We got enough. Our team did a really good job and looked through it and made us, ask the questions, and they were probably realized that it's probably not going to work it, and they're not going to be successful. I think most of them did. I think there's only been 2 or 3 that we probably had to vote on, and on the flip side, there's a lot, particularly what we've seen more is the startup, and those are rocky too, because the recommendations, they don't have the financial aspect. You don't know where the teachers are going to come from, so it's just interesting because it kind of goes both ways. But for me, is that process of discussion and then knowing the work that our staff has done, and then we interview them as we did, and you get to see not only do you get answers or non-answers, or you also get kind of their bedside manner, I don't know how you want to say it, and I think that is a telling aspect, not only to the board, but again, it's another opportunity for the public, who, and I unabashedly support parents to make the decision, which is why I support school choice. But I think as a board, governing board, we have an obligation to do something here. And part of that is this discussion and making it transparent, because I want to ensure that the community, us as a board, but also those parents can have as much insight into what is to become. So we aren't, so when I had sent that to Dr. Asplin, And because there were some areas that I had concerns with. I've done some due diligence. I thought we were going to have more things back from staff, but I know that I think Dr. Asplund had moved it to the workshop, and then it was put back on the agenda. So either way, I think, again, in my mind, transparency is key for the people who are going to make those decisions, so they're able to understand that, because there were a lot of discussions about, and I had asked that about board meetings. How does, and I know a member of the public mentioned that, so thank you, because that was one thing I asked, like how would a parent go to your school board meeting? And so we had kind of some of those questions. Also asked about how many had closed. This is a unique situation here because we are already building and have in our capital improvement plan a K-8 right in that same area. And so a lot of the capital aspects of, in my mind, I think from a fiduciary standpoint, that the continuity of if they open, we open. I think our schools are, I think will be very competitive. And I think we could be very challenging to them. And again, that's why that process comes of, will they continue to go through it? So my question from a legal standpoint, because on the other side, I am very uncomfortable with the financial impact of, anywhere from the range of 300, 500,000. If that were to come forward, if they chose, so in the event there was a denial of this board, and understanding they have the right to appeal, and they are going to be evaluated at the Department of Education on those 5 criteria, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then and at that moment, do they notify us that they're appealing, and then we can revisit it? I mean, I know that some may sound silly, but I'm just curious, what are our options if that happens?
What the statutory process is that if it is denied or not acted upon again, which counts as a denial, we have 10 days to put our rationale in writing, and we have to establish that it was denied based on good cause. So we would have to make a submission to the charter school and to the State Board of Education, and then they would decide whether they appeal or not.
Okay, and then one final question is, well, for now, is the from the capital asset, as was mentioned, from a leasing standpoint, we don't have any determination or understanding where the structure right now, the ownership, what have you. But in the event we open our district school and they lose a substantial amount of enrollment and realize it's not fiscally, operationally makes sense to continue, that capital asset, we have a myriad of, there's in statute, is my understanding?
Yeah, there's a process laid out in the statute for funds and assets and facilities. And regarding facilities in the statute, there are several different ways you can kind of disband that facility. And one of them is to turn it over to the school district. One of them is to enter into some other type of contractual agreement between the parties. And the third one is the charter pays back the money and keeps the school.
And that's assuming there's not, that's assuming that they own the building, not a third-party agreement, at least.
Right. Whoever the owner would be, whether it's the charter school or somebody else, that would be up to the owner.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Rose.
My questions have been answered. Thank you.
We haven't heard from Dr. Asplund yet. Would you mind, Mrs. Brown?
I would really like to have staff answer the questions that we brought up, and then I still have, like you said, I had questions of the attorney, questions of staff, and then I have comments, my closing comments on it.
So before we have staff, Millie Wheeler will discuss that. Just a reminder to everyone that the attachment in there does talk about the answers, whether they met or did not meet. The attachment is in there for everyone to see. But also, you're right, Ms. Ziegler. We did have a conversation about having it on a workshop, and I know I put that email out and asked for conversation, which I did receive conversation, and the thought was the conversation and the input that I received was that we need to just go ahead and have it on tonight so that everyone could discuss it. And then if we had to pull it, we could then have it on the next workshop, because the next workshop is on the 14th and the next board meeting is on the 21st, which is before July 1st, which we have no problem doing. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that I was just doing what I thought I was told to do. And in the meantime, we do have Millie Wheeler here who will discuss that.
If I may speak to that, we received the application in January, and per statute, we have 90 days to approve it or deny it, or obtain, an agreeable date with the charter school. We have at this point agreed to extend that 90-day deadline to today. I'm not aware, at least me personally, of any additional extension that exists. So I think the decision really should be made today unless we can get the charter school to agree to, an alternate date.
Okay, Ms. Wheeler, thank you.
Good evening. As if you recall during the capacity interview, that we all posed several questions. In fact, even when they met with you prior to that, you posed individual questions. Those questions, well, some of them, because the capacity interview came afterwards, but they were presented to the applicant in writing, and the applicant was given a period of time in which to respond in writing. They did provide us answers in writing. They should have been included in a document that was given to you along with the summary, and if it wasn't, I'm happy to provide that. Some of the answers were provided very clearly. Some of them were not so. They were answered, but in a vague manner. And the Title I question in particular, in my quick referencing back to the document, was seemingly a vague answer, just saying that they were using their budget model based on an existing school in their network with similar enrollment data, but they didn't provide us with which school that was. Unfortunately, once they provide their answers, we didn't have another opportunity to write them back with additional questions. The team, the Charter Review Commission did go back, or Charter Review team rather, did go back and review their answers and make final recommendations, and that was included as one of our final concerns, that we just don't foresee them getting a Title I population in the area in which they are planning on building. 1, and 2, even if they did, that's not an option in operating in year 1. Were there other questions?
If I can, Millie, if I can jump in for a second.
Absolutely.
Part of the issue is with the replication charter, which this is that according to statute, and Patrick and Millie can please confirm this, that they have to replicate the educational model. They don't have to replicate the educational demographics. The Welland Park School is going to be in an area with very different demographics than the school in Clay County. We do not believe that they would be eligible for Title I funds. And we brought that up, and as Millie said, they answered in a very vague manner.
What about the ESE questions we've had about you not having the right people online? And like
many of their responses were that they would provide the appropriate personnel at the time. They did not suggest, and Millie, please elaborate. They did not suggest how they would do that. They didn't feel that they were obligated to do so. Again, this is a replication charter, so a lot of their answers were basically that if we met the very narrow specifications of what they had to do to have a replication charter, that they would be approved. My understanding, when I read all their answers and we read it as a committee, and I want to say thank you so much for that committee. They did tremendous due diligence on this. The applicant did not provide sufficient information to answer that question for you.
One of the requests I had of the applicant also was that, they will share a percent off the top with their management company, and I asked if they would add anything in there to say that the referendum dollars that are voted on locally, if they would stay with the school, or give us a plan on how they were going to use those. Did they respond to that at all about the referendum dollars they'd be entitled to?
My understanding is no. Millie, can you confirm that?
I'm looking in writing right now. I don't see it on my quick search here. I apologize. I don't recall what their exact answer was. But if this were to go through with an approval, then we go into a contract negotiation period. So that could certainly be addressed at that time.
Absolutely.
So if I may just follow up a little bit more, I would say that where I'm frustrated as a public school board member is that I also support choice. and we have charter schools that are accountable to the school district. We oversee them, and we have wonderful relationships with them. Sarasota Military Academy, Dreamers Academy, Leadership Academy, Sarasota School for Arts and Sciences. I can go on. What is frustrating is that in my due diligence of being and I repeat this a lot, a public school board member, is that I look at the trajectory of charter school history in our state. And we start out with this friendly, if they can find a specific need and it's a complement to what the school district is doing, and we become a great partnership and we all work together through last year's legislation of colleges and can approve charter schools. And now this year, supposedly it's no longer our responsibility, and for profit as long as they meet these narrow guidelines. And I look at that, and I'm making a long story long because I think it's really important for the public to understand what for-profit charter schools means. It is a deterioration of public schools, and that is a mistake to allow those, especially in a school district like Sarasota County, especially. And so lots of people ask me, why did you not ask any questions when they were in the workshop and you could have? And my answer was, because they are for profit. And when you take profit and you take it out of a classroom, that's a problem. So from my point of view, that's why I was happy to have this discussion tonight instead of any other time. Really, sorry, no, I appreciate that, but I just cannot support this. Any more discussion?
Yes, I'd like to make a comment, Mr. Edwards. This is the 90th day, and I understand that after 90 days, if we haven't gotten permission from the charter applicant, that they automatically get approved. So we must vote tonight.
Mrs. Brown.
I'll try to sum up my concerns about this. Again, charter schools are supposed to be offering something different. Now, they call it a collegiate school, but there's nothing compelling or, in their mission or in what they're proposing. And when you look at, I looked into very closely the overview of what Clay County said about the school when they reviewed it. And their review was very damning. I mean, when they said that there was, ESE programs that weren't being followed up and IEP meetings not being done. I mean, I'm very concerned about that. And at a time when we are pushing parental rights and saying that parents have a chance or the opportunity, they are entitled to the opportunity to speak before the board. There's a board that isn't even in Sarasota County, and the one they had in Clay County didn't meet in Clay County, or they may not have met at all publicly. You can meet on Zoom. That didn't happen either. So I really, really have concerns about how responsible they will be to the parents or the students that were there, let alone to the public that is funding them, our taxpayers, or us, the board. I just have concerns about that. And to say that they're collegiate, and they say, oh, we've got these out there. This is what the materials we have. Well, that's not what was being taught at Clay County schools. They were getting packets of mimeograph sheets. I mean, they weren't reading from the thing, and that's another thing. I mean, we're supposed to have the lesson plans out there. We're supposed to tell the parents what we're teaching. and they apparently weren't teaching what they said they were teaching. And I just really have the problems with not having, the answers to the students with disabilities, because that's very important, that you meet all the children and meet their needs. And when I see that the Manatee County School, the nearest one to us, is operating at 50% capacity, parents are leaving the school. They're not happy with the school. And then I see what's happening at Clay County. I don't want that replicated in Sarasota County. And I think, their budget, I believe it's not a green light across the board up in Washington to get that money anymore. And I don't think they're going to get the money they think they are if they're not going to have transportation. Will they get any of the categorical dollars for transportation, but then not use them? I don't understand. I have real problems with their budget. And I think, when their budget dollars are coming from the taxpayers in Sarasota County, the money isn't coming from Tallahassee. Tallahassee says how much they get, but that money comes from our taxpayers. I just can't support it. And I'm willing to say no to Charter Schools USA. I hope they listened to what we're saying today. I welcome them to do a request from what our emails have said, because there have been pretty, explicit emails on why these parents didn't want them, and many of the parents were from Welland Park. I hope they ask for those emails before they file an appeal so that they understand Sarasota County is different. Sarasota County really does not like for-profit charter schools, especially those that are not well performing. What they can call it an A school, but an A school that got a C last year is not an A school, in my opinion. So I'm going to say no, and I'll take my chances with them, and they file an appeal. And if that's what happens, well, we'll take that as it may and see how that goes, whether I want to continue with it or not. But at this time, I say no to Charter Schools USA in Sarasota County, Welland Park.
Any more discussion, board members?
No.
I call for a vote. I'm
May
sorry.
May I make the motion?
Yes, Mrs. Goodwin.
I move to reject Charter School USA's application for a new college preparatory charter school at Welland Park.
Do I have a second? I'll second. Mrs. Ziegler.
Thank you. I was just going to close out my thoughts. I'm kind of surprised that today was our last day, and so I didn't. And I know Dr. Aspin had included that to ask for an extension. And again, I just to sum it up, I do think that public discussion is incredibly valuable, and it does play a role in if you are denying, and then you have an opportunity to highlight those things that may very well lead them to not appeal. So I feel like that is kind of, we've been a little bit hampered on that aspect. But I also, Millie, where'd she go? I have one more question, because as you walk back, but I will say that I think the time aspect, I think there's additional information that would benefit us, whether it impacts the 5 criteria or not, it just benefits the community. The academics are a concern, and again, those are things that need to be hashed out publicly. So again, it's more opportunities for parents to be more informed. And then I can't get past the back-to-back aspects of it being in Welland Park. We're building one in Welland Park. I mean, we were talking about it in Welland Park. I mean, so it's not that it was just out of the blue. However, was there anything in their packet that they provided a letter of support from Welland Park community?
Yes, there were several letters in there from
the master development community. Because I think that's what they had mentioned.
There were several. I mean, there weren't a ton off the top of my head. I want to guess there were like maybe 10 or so from people in that community, but I don't.
But not from the develop. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Most of them were generic form letters, but there were a couple that were specific.
Okay. Got it.
Could you share those with?
Yeah.
Could you share those with me?
Absolutely. Yes, they're part of the application packet.
So thank you. So thank you for that. Sorry to make you walk all the way over there for that question. But and again, thank you for everything you guys did. To anyone watching this, the work that the CRC does is intensive, and it's powerful, and I think it's a really, really good process. Again, from a transparent standpoint of when people make those decisions. So I really, really thank you guys for that. I I just feel like there's more opportunity for information. I feel like we're stuck behind that. I think the academics aspects and the back-to-back with the building of a K-8 right there. And I worry that we will pull enrollment and then they will leave. And because at some point it's their business operation and they're going to, I mean, there's a reality to that. I'm pro school choice. That's not mean I'm all in for every single charter school. It's just I want options that make sense, and I want to present it in a manner that parents can make the best decision. I am not loving the fact that we could be paying $400,000 in legal fees. I am curious about whether they'll continue, because again, as I said to them on the day, I think that they have a very high mountain to climb in comparison. And so we will see where that goes. And then as the attorney said, if we want to continue with the appeal, we'll move for that. But I will not be supporting this. Well, I vote no, I guess. Wait, I vote yes to say no. Okay.
Mrs. Brown,
Yes to deny.
Mrs. Ziegler,
Yes to deny. That's very weird.
Mrs. Rose,
Yes to reject.
Mrs. Goodwin,
Yes, proudly.
and I
deny.
also am happy to deny.
So the denial passes 5-0?
5-0. Thank you, board. Item 58, the school board policy 2.35. May I have a motion?
I move the approval of School Board Policy 2.35, respect and civility in schools and district offices.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Ziegler.
Briefly, thank you. There's a couple things on this, and I know, again, this is one of those things that sounds great, so people in the community think I have to give a little bit of a narrative. Of course, I support civility and safety in our schools. There are twofold of areas that I am concerned about, especially hinging off of what just transpired in Texas. I think it is imperative that when we have a policy that it be in the language may and shall should be very explicit, and particularly when it comes to any kind of individual, I'm trying to pull it up here, that anytime there is any kind of harassment of physical harm, that staff may document it, or you may do this. When we're talking about something of that level, I think it should be shall, because if we're talking about an environment, we want to ensure that if there's something that's transpiring, I got it, but that we're covering that, and that kind of transfers over to, is it doing what we need it to do? Because there are some elements that are subjective to it. I am worried about, again, and I think we're moving in a positive direction, and I want to thank everyone for that, so that's good. Let's keep that up. But there are elements that I think are subjective, and I don't want those to be weaponized or abused. So I think that there are areas absolutely of improvement in this policy. I think it's slanted a bit, and I don't think it does what it needs to do, and particularly I don't think if it's truly intended to be safety and, well, more than anything, the safety, but civility, that there needs to be more prescriptive language about when there is any kind of threat of physical harm, that it's not they may document it. That should be, for a safety standpoint, that should be a requirement, because so I'm not supporting it. I welcome amendments, but this has been advertised. I know I mentioned it before. I'm concerned just that it's not really hitting the mark. Again, I support safety and civility in all of our schools, but I don't know that this policy actually addresses it properly.
Mrs. Brown.
I know it goes from shall, when we're looking at item 1, when violence is directed against an employee or theft against property, employees shall promptly report the incident to their principal, and they should complete the incident report. And I think what you're probably talking about is towards the end, when they're looking at abusive, threatening, obscene mail, email, or voicemail messages. That's when, if the message threatens an employee with personal harm, the employee may contact law enforcement. But I think that we don't always want to report it to law enforcement, and I think that's the one that the employee may, and I think that's, I mean, if I had to report every email that I got that was threatening to law enforcement, yeah, we would have all been embarrassed. But I think that, I think where it's, when the violence is directed against an employee or the district, it shall there. It's the emails that are sometimes may, and I think sometimes we have to realize that some of those emails are not to be taken at face value.
Any more discussion? I'm going to call the vote. Mrs. Brown?
Yes.
Mrs. Ziegler?
No.
Mrs. Rose?
No.
Mrs. Goodwin?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Motion passes 3-2, 2 dissenting votes, Mrs. Ziegler and Mrs. Rose. Item 59, that the draft of the student progression plan, may I have a motion?
I move item 59, approval of the draft of the 2022-2023 student progression plan as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? I'll call for the vote. Mrs. Ziegler?
I'm going to say something positive.
Mrs. Ziegler?
Sorry.
I missed it.
No, I just want to say I thank you to the superintendent and staff for putting this on ahead of August. I'm so excited. It's been multiple years I've been saying this. So thank you very much. It makes it much more meaningful when I'm voting yes today. But thank you. I just wanted that to not go unnoticed.
I'll call for the vote. Mrs. Brown?
Yes.
Mrs. Ziegler?
Yes.
Mrs. Rose?
Yes.
Mrs. Goodwin?
Yes.
And Mr. Edwards, yes. 5-0, the motion passes.
Item 60, I move the approval to advertise the revised code of student conduct.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? I'll call for a vote. Mrs. Brown?
Yes.
Mrs. Ziegler?
Yes.
Mrs. Rose?
Yes.
Mrs. Goodwin?
Yes.
And I follow with a yes. Motion passes 5-0. Item 61.
I'm going to move the approval of the settlement agreement to conclude litigation in 2021-CA.2274NC.
Second.
Any discussion? I'll call for a vote. Mrs. Brown?
Yes.
Mrs. Ziegler?
Yes.
Mrs. Rose?
Yes.
Mrs. Goodwin?
Yes.
And I follow also with a yes. Motion passes unanimously. Item 62. Do I have a motion?
Item 62, I move that we send correspondence denying the request from Sarasota County governments to sublease the parcel of land commonly referred to as the Florida House to the Manatee Sarasota Building Industry Association.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Ziegler?
If we could just refresh us where we're at here. I recall that we had the workshop. I know that this is our land, is my recollection. If Dr. Assman, can you just refresh us where we're at right now?
Yes, ma'am. We do own the land, and the county owns the house. And they recently, on May 25th, sent a letter to us asking us, actually saying for the purpose of this correspondence is to officially notify the school board as the landlord of our intent to sublease the property to Manatee Sarasota Building Industry Association. We are requesting the school board to provide written consent to this. And in the contract, we do not need to consent to a sublease. They have to gather our consent. And our letter is to not give consent for this.
Follow-up. Is it follow-up? Is it okay? What's the next step then? Because is that so? If it's a denial, then what?
The next step is, I know that earlier in the year, we had talked about acquiring, and we had sent them a letter back on March 2nd about the fact that we would like to acquire that particular house. And so that would be our next step as far as acquiring the house in some way, possibly purchasing the house. I know Mr. Dumas was in the process of gathering an appraisal on the house as well, so that the board would know what that was and make a decision if they wanted to purchase the house.
Thank you.
Any discussion? Mrs. Brown, calling for a vote.
Yes.
Mrs. Ziegler?
No.
Mrs. Rose?
No.
Mrs. Goodwin,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Item passes with the dissenting votes being Mrs. Ziegler and Mrs. Rose. Item 63.
Item 63, which was originally item 11, move the approval of the resolution to increase educational impact fees as presented. And we'll discuss it, I guess, after we get it in order.
Mr. Dumas.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? No discussion?
No, Jody's coming up to explain it.
Oh, it needs explaining because we talked about it.
He's going to explain it, otherwise I'll
We talked
explain
about it in a workshop, so it was explained. So, is there any oh, Mrs. Goodwin?
Well, I just wanted to say that, this has been a long time in coming because we realized that there was some consideration in our county due to the fact that we had had a horrible 5-year recession or 5-year plus recession. And we wanted to do all that we could to promote and help those people purchasing homes as well as those developers and builders. But those times have come and gone, and whoa, we really are in a growth mode now, and we have to do something. We are the 11th lowest impact fee county in the state, so we have to do something.
Any further discussion? Mrs. Brown?
I again, as what Ms. Goodwin said, we were at like 25% of what it should have been the last time, and we'd held that for some time, and I think we even didn't we remove them for a short period too, and since that time, the legislature has passed language that says we can only increase it by 50% of the current impact fee rate per year. So currently, for a single-family home, we're at $22,032. The impact study said we should be at $6,533. Because of the current language, we can only increase it to $2,286 in year one. Year two, it'll be $2,540. Year three, $2,794, and year four, $3,048. Multifamily will go from current to $561. The max that they said it should be is $2,193, but it'll go from $581, $645, $710 to $774 in year four. The one for mobile home, the current one is $188. The max that was recommended to us was $592, but next year, because of the law, it'll go from the $188 to $212. In year two, $235. In year three, $259. In year four, $282. This is the maximum increase that is allowed by the state. It doesn't come to what the maximum was that the report said, but this brings us up closer to what it should be, but we'll still be one of the lowest ones in the state.
My question is actually to my fellow board members, not to Mr. Dumas. I left the workshop with the impression that we had achieved a consensus that this was the appropriate impact fee increase that we all had gotten to. So when I see it taken off of the consent agenda and moved to new business, that usually indicates that people want to discuss it, so I'm all ears. Mrs. Goodwin.
I'm sorry, I have lowered mine. I've already spoken.
Okay. Mrs. Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. I don't believe the question was answered. And if it was, I apologize. Can you project over the 4 years the amount of money that the maximum 50% would generate, I think it's far less than what we might expect.
So my apologies. I do not. I think we provided that in the workshop, but I did not bring that tonight, so I can't speak to those numbers. But I believe our CFO Bonnie Penner, who is actually on Zoom tonight, I believe that was some of the information that her and Mitzi Corcoran and Sheena Runyons provided in the workshop. So, but I apologize, Ms. Rose, I can't provide that again tonight.
That's okay. I can't remember the amount, and if anyone has it.
So I have finances charts here. If we adopt the 50% with the phase of 4 years, in 5 years, the impact fee revenue would be $36,543,150.
Thank you very much.
Mrs. Ziegler.
Okay, so you said it was 36, and that was, so if we do the rolling as presented, the 25 plus 25, so it would be a total of maximum of?
That would be a total 5-year impact fee revenue.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. No, I think it's interesting. We did this in 2015, and I was mentioned before, and again, thank you to the planning department, and you guys it's very mathematical science. And then those years we didn't build any schools. And I know there's long-term planning, but it's no secret to anyone here. If you drive down just drive on Fruitville, you know that we're exploding. And in my mind, I think that it's the balance of things. We are at a moment where we need to build 3 schools, but it's also the worry about the compression. I did reach out to many people in the business community to get a sense of that. Reach out to developers, and wanting to understand what that level is, because what that impact is. I think at the current rate, and it'd be nice to know that the response back was, we know we're building, we know we're growing, and we know how important our schools are to our community. And so this is a very different time if you consider in 2015 when it was kind of a hypothetical. So I will be supporting this.
Thank you. Any more discussion? I'll call for the vote. Mrs. Brown?
Yes. Yes.
Mrs. Ziegler?
Yes.
Mrs. Rose?
Yes.
Mrs. Goodwin?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. Motion passes 5-0.
And I just want to reiterate what Ms. Ziegler said, is that when we reached out to developers this year, they understood where we were at, and none of them are here to oppose this, so that it was on the consent agenda. And I'm glad that they understand that they're a partner with us, and they know that people move to Sarasota, many of them for our schools. So I appreciate their support.
Thank you. The next monthly work session is scheduled for Tuesday, June 14th at 9 a.m. The next board meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, June 21st at 6 p.m. This meeting will be held at the Longboat Key Town Hall Chambers. Address there is 501 Bay Isles Road, Longboat Key. And with that, we are adjourned. I will pick up the general comments from the public. I'm calling Ms. Barbara Vaughn first. For the record, I wanted to make sure that Ms. Vaughn understood that we're not opposed to prayer here in the boardroom. Just wasn't an agenda item specifically. Mr. Cosentino. He also left. Jan Coppell, thanks for your patience. Give us a second, we can make your mic live.
Hello? My son has been asking me if he pretends he's a girl, can he go into the girls' bathroom at school? What should I tell him? With monkeypox being the next plandemic, not pandemic, but plandemic, why don't you give every student one of these, a banana, so when the monkeypox comes to school, you can just give the banana to the monkey and there won't be any more monkeypox. You have all these police officers here, when you just had a massacre of children in Texas, why aren't they reassigned to the school to protect the children? I don't understand. Am I missing something? Or did they have some other purpose? You guys aren't scared of us. I mean, I know that the National School Board Association, with probably some support from some members here, considering us parents as domestic terrorists, but do you think do we look like domestic terrorists? So maybe you would like to reconsider what you think of us. We're just trying to protect our kids. You don't own the children at school. They're on loan so you can educate them, not indoctrinate them. Your job is not to turn the children against their parents. One board member recently asked one of the speakers if they had any kids in the school system. And, you know, it was quite a scene. But maybe there's a point to that, and maybe school board members who don't have children in the school should resign today. And, you know, I came from New York, and you guys would fit in just fine there. They're very good at indoctrinating the kids, so you won't be out of a job. When the parents fear the school board, not only is there tyranny, the children suffer through indoctrination and sexual deviance. When the school board fears the parents, the children, the students, become free to be themselves and to learn. And one of the school board members mentioned tonight something I think is correct and good. They weren't teaching what they said.
Thank you. Paulina Testerman, Jennifer Cottrell on deck.
Good evening, Paulina Testerman. I try to attend school board meetings regularly. When I am here, my family often turns on live YouTube feed in our living room and watches the school board antics play out. On May the 3rd in these chambers, you, the school board members of Sarasota County, allowed Speaker Alexis Spiegelman of Moms for Liberty to read a graphic excerpt from the book, The Bluest Eye. In case the school board and the audience don't know, The Bluest Eye is approved for only high school students in Sarasota County libraries. It is not approved for elementary school students, and it is not approved for middle school students. In fact, the book cannot be found in any other school other than high schools in Sarasota County. That May 3rd night, my daughter was listening to our school board meeting while finishing her homework. She is 12. She was exposed to content that is age inappropriate during that meeting. While Mrs. Spiegelman tries to convince the public that she's outraged over the language in this book, it is she herself who exposes innocent children to graphic descriptions of incest and rape. I had no choice but to broach the subject with my daughter, as she had many questions for me when I returned home. I request that the board be more mindful of the fact that school board meetings should be appropriate for all listeners and should stop speakers who choose to create space for fanfare and theatrics that can negatively impact our children. In spite of the fact that my son also listened to the meeting that night, you'll notice that I'm not here to advocate for him because he is 16 years old and perfectly capable of understanding difficult subjects like those mentioned in the book. I pity children whose parents raise them with blinders to the struggles of real-world events. Yes, rape is a terrible subject, but an important one to discuss. I find it laughable that parents will trust their kids with cell phones, social media, cars, and even guns, yet they gasp at the thought of a book.
Sally Nista on deck.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Cottrell. As a parent of a son that just graduated, I stand before you with a fresh set of eyes and a different perspective. I have no reason to be here other than my dedication to the students and teachers in Sarasota County. As a mentor, I see the struggles that some students have when they don't have access to a computer at home. Missing assignments start to pile up because they couldn't complete them at home, and doing it the next day in class isn't an option because the class has moved on to a new assignment. So missing assignments start to pile up and more zeros entered in the grade book. The stress and anxiety of not having the ability to get your work done starts to increase. They feel like giving up because what's the use of trying when they feel like they can't get out of the hole that they've dug? If school wasn't stressful enough, imagine doing it every day without the adequate tools and resources you need. We could solve this by providing every incoming freshman with a laptop, then create a way to get sophomores through seniors a laptop if they couldn't currently have one. We could start with those students who get free and reduced lunches and then expand it from there based on need. I know you're saying this is inexpensive, we can't afford it, but we can't put a price tag on our children's education. These students are our future generation, and we need to make sure that every student is successful and we have the tools that they need to achieve their success. You have students that are eager to learn, and all we need to do is provide them with a solid foundation to start off with, and then we can stand back and watch what they build. I close my eyes and I imagine the wonderful things our students can do with the right foundation. I encourage you to do the same. Let's remember, some of the things that we use every day are considered luxuries to others. Let's not penalize a student's ability to excel in school because their family had to choose between providing a roof over their head, food on the table, and clothes on their back. Times are tough across the board, and it creates obstacles that impedes our students' ability to learn. I am asking that this school district to help remove those obstacles and make sure that every student has the ability to achieve their full potential. Then, and only then, can we really achieve that A status school district. Thank you.
Karen Hamblin on deck. Bren Gibbs on deck.
Sally Nista. Dear School Board and Dr. Asplin, I wanted to lighten some things up today because my past speeches have been a little tough on all of you. So I'm happy to tell you I was wrong. I've seen your ways and wanted to celebrate my new life with you, all because of you, the board. My life partner and I recently took a trip south. We were able to come across the border, and we are now illegals. I'm now able to identify as a Guatemalan girl, and I'm rolling in the Sarasota County schools in August. I'm thrilled to know that I'll be in school because of the whole equity policy, which I love. I will pass with straight A's, graduate, and not lift a finger because I'm a minority. I love equity. I might get pregnant because of all the sex books and I'm reading in the school libraries. I'm hoping that I can get assistance from that one school board member who worked for Planned Parenthood. She can help me do away with all of my mistakes. She'll be such a good resource for the children. I'm leaving open my options of transitioning while in school. It will probably depend on if my teacher is fluid or non-binary or some weird way. Equality Florida could help me with that too. I will look forward to the board putting in guidelines that will allow me to do a breast reduction and take hormone blockers during school hours. I'm a freebie though, because you don't have to hide it from my parents. They're both dead. It's probably a good chance I'll be class president in a few years and I can give a speech about my curly hair down there. I'm prepared for the administrators to tell me no, and I can say my body, my choice. I love a socialistic America. I'm so grateful that I'm in Sarasota County where political activism, social agendas are more important than academic excellence. Thank you, Sarasota Board.
Angela Wynn on deck.
My name is Bren Gibbs. I have heard each of you at one point or another on the school board confess to be Christian. Christianity follows this book, the Bible. It is where a Christian gets their instruction on what to believe, what is right, what is wrong, how to live, even how to think, and who to obey. Your religion is at the core of who you are. This is the common ground that I speak to you today with you as I confess to be a Christian also. What is sad is that when people who are supposed to be leaders over education can't even educate themselves properly on their own religion, they misinform themselves and follow others who misinform on clear topics in Scripture that explain what is right and what is wrong. We have the blind leading the blind. As a Christian, you have everything you need right here to know that the LGBTQ lifestyle is wrong as a Christian, but some have chosen to be blind and allow others who are blind to lead them. It doesn't matter who gets up in this room or in a pulpit and says otherwise. It doesn't matter how many degrees a person has. If what they're saying as a Christian does not line up with what the Word of God says, they are false teachers, false pastors, and leaders. Bottom line, because that is what the Bible says about them. This is not rocket science. We are not talking about if Adam and Eve had a belly button. Last month, there was a little girl that got up and shared clearly in Scripture concerning these simple truths. We are talking about very blatant, self-explanatory morals and truths in the Bible that are not questionable when you know Scripture, even to a child.
Unfortunately, those of you who are doing this prove to be illegitimate educational leaders. Number one, by saying you are Christians but not even educating yourselves on clear morals.
Alexis Spiegelman on deck.
Hello, I'm Angela Wynn. I'm here today to applaud the school board for celebrating and encouraging parental involvement in their children's education. I recently learned that school cafeterias are so high-tech that parents can choose which foods they want their children to eat. For example, if a child had dietary restrictions, I could limit what foods my child could purchase. I recognize that a child's dietary restrictions shouldn't impact their peers, so obviously I wouldn't advocate for removing all food from the cafeteria that my child couldn't eat. The same is true of our libraries. You can decide what content your children can and cannot have access to. You can create a list of books you deem appropriate or books you deem inappropriate. And here's the clincher. You don't have to limit my child's reading material in order to control your own children's content. That would be silly. But that's exactly what groups like Moms for Liberty are doing when they push for the removal of books. These organizations are trying to make decisions on behalf of all parents instead of worrying about their own children. These parents consider themselves the moral authority on what is and isn't appropriate for my child, in spite of the fact that they aren't experts. Who are the experts that decide what is age appropriate for our children? Those experts are psychologists, teachers, educators, and developmental experts, not opinionated parents. Because we all know what they say about opinions. When did we stop trusting experts in their fields? When did we as a society become so overtly arrogant that we consider ourselves experts at everything? I certainly don't tell my mechanic how to fix my car or my accountant how to file my taxes. That's because I recognize the importance of staying in my lane. What a concept. So please, Moms for Liberty, spare us your virtue signaling and worry about your own kids, not mine. I'm perfectly capable of deciding what's in my child's best interest.
Teresa DeWitt on deck.
Good evening, Board. Alexis Spiegelman, Moms for Liberty. I'd like to say I think the majority of the country stopped following the experts last year. The book I read is also in Pineview, which is for grades 2 and above. So that is my point. If it's not appropriate for, your 12-year-old, it's not appropriate for the second graders at Pineview. I'm having trouble understanding the logic behind your policy on the objectionable material, and I'd like to ask you to review that process. Your policy seems a bit reckless as it gives our Sarasota County students access to potentially harmful material until the process works itself out. Have you ever read the studies that explore the relationship between exposure to sexually explicit materials and mental health? How about the correlation between sexually explicit materials and violence? It seems that it would be more prudent to take a proactive approach similar to how recalls are handled. When we find that an item is potentially dangerous for public consumption, we do not wait to take action. To the contrary, out of an abundance of caution for the well-being of the public, a recall is issued, and everyone errs on the side of caution for the consumer, even when the consumer is the family pet. In this case, the consumers are our children. Can you help me understand why your policy takes a less aggressive approach to protecting the well-being, the precious minds and hearts of Sarasota County's children than we do our family pets? It is your job to ensure that the materials in our schools are appropriate. That burden is not ours. Will we hold you accountable? Absolutely. But if you don't like public exposure about the shameful material you have provided to Sarasota County's children, then I suggest you reevaluate your vetting process. You should be able to tell us which vendors provided the sexually explicit material and who in the district approved it. If it's too much for me to read here in a meeting, it has no business being in our schools. It's absurd that you continue to assume roles that you have absolutely no business being in while neglecting your primary reason for existence as a board. The irony here is astounding. The people who are the chief contributors to the mental health crisis in our youth now deem themselves qualified to treat it.
Teresa DeWitt. Excuse me. I wanted to provide some additional information on the social emotional learning program that was presented to the community several meetings ago. The Character Strong program for the elementary schools. I have concerns with this program due to its affiliation with Panorama Company. Is the board familiar with Panorama? My research shows that Character Strong recently partnered with Panorama, which is the same SEL program aligned with our very own United States Attorney General Merrick Garland. The very same AG who partnered with the National School Board Association to utilize the Justice Department and FBI to develop terrorist tags for parents who spoke at school board meetings. Panorama is a social-emotional learning program designed by A.G. Garland's son-in-law. Panorama and Character Strong is part of CASEL. CASEL is the guideline gatekeeper who certifies and obtains funding for most SEL programs, but not all of them. CASEL currently has changed their definition of SEL and has become more controversial. How does this affect our district? We are not required for a specific SEL program in the state of Florida. That means we can shop around. Character Strong may be a great program, but they have partnered and aligned with an unhealthy company, Panorama. This program is, in my mind, has not been properly vetted. In closing, I have a few questions for the board. Did you know Character Strong is being given to 3 elementary schools as a pilot program next year? Excuse me. Are the parents being informed so they can opt out if they don't want to participate? Dr. Asplin, are there any staff or administrators benefiting from Character Strong and Panorama partnership being allowed into our elementaries? Are the SEL opt-out forms for surveys and programs being offered to all parents in elementary and high school for 2022-2023? I believe we have had enough controversy in the school district. All of you currently have a current SEL opt-out form for the SEL and the sexuality. Thank you.
That concludes the public comments for this evening. We thank you for your comments.
I'd just like to point out, several people mentioned NSBA, that the Florida School Boards Association withdrew their membership in NSBA over that letter and a few other things. So just to clarify, the Florida School Boards Association is no longer affiliated with NSBA.
And any last comments from my fellow board members? Mrs. Ziegler.
Thank you very much. I wanted to, I know Dr. Asplin, we spoke about this. One of the items that were on our consent agenda, and I know there was a lot of discussion, so I wanted to wait for a moment, but that was about an articulation agreement with USF. I know Dr. Asplin and I were talking about this before, and many of these people on the board remember we also had a articulation agreement formally with SCF, and I wanted to highlight one of our students who is Alexandra James, who actually she's a junior at Pineview, and she actually just graduated with her AA from UCF. With magna cum laude opportunities, so as a junior. And I highlight that because when that contract, and there was a lot of things that took place at that time, but there were also, I don't know if it was an erosion of relationships, but it wasn't just students and families at Pineview. It impacted a lot of families at all of our high schools. And I wanted to highlight that because it illustrated one, the wonderful perseverance, but also just what a great opportunity our dual enrollment options are. And I'm very proud that we have USF and we have UF. But I did want to highlight the former relationship with I can mess them all up, SCF, and whether or not, I know if that's something in the future that Dr. Asplin can review to see if that opportunity could be revisited for our students at all of our high schools. So, and again, congratulations to Mrs. James. I would love to have her here at a future meeting where we could recognize her more formally. Thank you.
Mrs. Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Just quickly, we had Teen Court on the agenda this evening, and the representatives that lead Teen Court were here, and I wanted to recognize them and give them a shout out as a principal and a behavior specialist. It's an extraordinary program for our students where they can have real world consequences and some genuine learning of what it means to participate in the court system from a multitude of angles. So thank you to Teen Court, and thank you for their representatives being here this evening.
I couldn't agree with you more, Mrs. Rose. Any other comments? With that, have a good night.